Colorado Territory, 1876. The glass chandelier in Denver's Grand Palace Hotel cast golden light across the polished oak table where Senator William Carpenter hunched over his papers. His weathered hands spotted with age meticulously arranged documents as the grandfather clock in the corner struck 9. Outside, rain pelted against tall windows, the drumming providing a solemn backdrop to his work. "Everything is here," the senator said, his voice barely above a whisper as he passed a leather portfolio to the young reporter seated across from him. "Land deeds, forged documents, payment records, all proof that Transcontinental isn't just building a railroad. They're stealing an empire." James Reed, a thin man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers, glanced nervously at the door. "Are you certain about these accusations? Senator Sherman Wade is one of the most powerful men in Colorado. A war hero." Carpenter's eyes hardened. War heroes can become tyrants when nobody's watching. Son Wade fought for the Union, but what he's doing now, forcing people from their homes, bribing officials, breaking treaties, it betrays everything we bled for. The senator didn't notice the door to the adjoining room opened slightly, nor the bright blue eyes peering through the crack. Sarah Carpenter, 26 years old, with her father's stubborn chin and her late mother's golden hair, listened intently, hand pressed against her racing heart. "I've spent 2 years gathering this evidence," the senator continued. "Tomorrow I present it to the governor." The window shattered. The sound of breaking glass melted with the thunderclap of a gunshot. Senator Carpenter jerked backward, a crimson bloom spreading across his white shirt. Reed toppled backward in his chair, scrambling away. "Father!" Sarah burst into the room as the senator slumped forward, blood pooling on the papers before him. Senator Carpenter's eyes found his daughter's. His lips moved, forming one word: "Run." A second shot splintered the doorframe inches from Sarah's head. Through the broken window, she glimpsed a figure in black retreating across the hotel's roof. With trembling hands, she grabbed the leather portfolio, clutching it to her chest as she fled into the hallway. Behind her, Reed's screams for help echoed through the corridor. But Sarah knew better than to wait. Her father had prepared her for this possibility. "If anything happens to me," he had told her just days ago, "trust no one. Get the evidence to Governor Rout personally." The service stairs took her to the hotel's rear exit. Rain immediately soaked her dress as she emerged into the alley, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had barely gone 20 yards when heavy footsteps splashed behind her. "Stop right there, Miss Carpenter." Sarah ran her boots slipping on wet cobblestones as she darted through narrow alleys, the portfolio clutched tightly under her arm. Denver's gas-lit streets blurred around her. Behind her, her pursuers' footsteps never faltered, steady, relentless. At the edge of town, she spotted Salvation, a wagon loaded with supplies driver preparing to depart despite the late hour. With her last surge of strength, Sarah leapt aboard, concealing herself beneath a tarp. Pain bloomed in her shoulder. Only then did she realize she'd been shot. 50 miles away, Elijah Morgan stood on the porch of his isolated ranch house, watching lightning split the sky above Silver Creek Valley. At 45, his face was weathered as the Colorado landscape itself, lines etched by sun and sorrow eyes that had seen too much death to sleep soundly. The rain hadn't reached his land yet, but the air carried its promise. The ranch was modest, a sturdy cabin, a barn corral, and a few outbuildings backed against a pine forest with mountains rising beyond. Not much to show for a life, but it was his, a sanctuary built far from people and their judgments. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the Medal of Honor tucked away in the wooden box he held. 11 years since Gettysburg. 11 years since Sherman Wade had dragged him bleeding and half dead from that blood-soaked wheat field. Some debts could never be repaid. "Enough ghosts for one night," Eli muttered, closing the box and returning inside. The cabin's interior was sparse but orderly. Weapons hung on the walls, reminders of his former life. A shelf of books stood, testament to long solitary winters. No photographs adorned the mantel. Memory served well enough to conjure the faces of his dead. Eli stoked the fire, then poured 2 fingers of whiskey. The routine was always the same: one drink before bed, enough to dull the edges, but not enough to conjure the nightmares of battle that alcohol sometimes brought. Tonight, however, unease prickled at his senses like the charge in the air before the storm broke. He was halfway through his whiskey when the first raindrop struck the roof. Then came another sound so faint he nearly missed it beneath the growing patter of rain. A voice, a woman's voice, carried on the wind from the direction of his storage shed. I can't breathe. Eli set down his glass, listening. Nothing but rain now. Had he imagined it? The war had left him with more than physical scars. Sometimes his mind played tricks, conjuring voices of the dead. Then it came again, weaker. Please, can't breathe. Eli grabbed his Colt revolver and a lantern. Outside, the rain had intensified, driven horizontally by gusting wind. He crossed the muddy yard to the storage shed, water streaming from his hat brim. As he pushed open the creaking door, the lantern light revealed familiar shapes, tools hanging on walls, sacks of grain, crates of supplies. Nothing seemed disturbed, but as he raised the lantern higher, he noticed something odd. A canvas tarp in the corner moved slightly, as if something beneath it struggled for air. Approaching cautiously, gun raised, Eli grasped the edge of the heavy rain-soaked tarp and pulled it back. Beneath lay a young woman, her golden hair matted with blood and dirt, face pale as death. Her chest barely moved with shallow breaths. Her rain-soaked dress clung to her slender frame, the right shoulder darkened with blood. Jesus Christ, Eli breathed. Holstering his gun and kneeling beside her, the woman's eyes fluttered open, bright blue clouded with pain and fear. She tried to speak, but only a rasping sound emerged. Easy now, Eli said, gathering her into his arms. She felt light, fragile. I've got you. Outside, a branch snapped in the darkness beyond the circle of lantern light. Eli froze, listening. The hairs on his neck rose as he sensed someone or something watching from the shadows. He squinted into the darkness, but saw nothing beyond the curtain of rain. When he looked back at the woman, her eyes had closed again. Blood seeped through her dress, warm against his arm. Whoever was out there would have to wait. This woman needed help now. Eli carried her through the downpour to his cabin, kicked the door shut behind him, and laid her gently on his bed. As he worked to remove her sodden jacket, something fell from an inner pocket, a newspaper clipping now damp and smudged. He paused his ministrations to glance at the headline, Senator Carpenter assassinated in Denver. Eli's eyes moved from the paper to the unconscious woman's face, recognition dawning. The resemblance was clear, even through the dirt and blood. This was Sarah Carpenter, the senator's daughter. And if she was here, trouble wouldn't be far behind. As if confirming his thoughts, a horse whinnied nervously in the barn. Eli moved to the window, peering out into the storm. Nothing visible in the darkness, but the sense of being watched persisted. He returned to Sarah, cutting away the blood-soaked fabric around her shoulder to reveal a bullet wound. The bullet had gone through clean, a small mercy as he cleaned and bandaged the injury. Sarah stirred, murmuring deliriously. Father, the evidence must reach the governor. Easy, Eli soothed, though his mind raced. Senator Carpenter had been investigating railroad corruption. Everyone knew that. If his daughter carried evidence important enough to get the senator killed, Sarah's eyes suddenly flew open, locking onto Eli's face with unexpected clarity. Denver, she gasped. I need to reach Denver. The governor. You're not going anywhere tonight, Eli said firmly. You've lost blood and there's a storm raging. Fear flashed across her face. She tried to sit up but fell back with a groan. You don't understand. They'll come for me, for the journal. Who's coming? Eli asked, though he suspected he knew. Before she could answer, her eyes rolled back, consciousness slipping away again. Eli finished bandaging her wound, then covered her with a blanket. He retrieved the newspaper clipping, reading it more carefully. The article mentioned the senator's crusade against corrupt business interests, but named no specific targets. As Eli folded the clipping, he noticed writing on the back a hastily scrawled note. Wade knows, trust no one. Eli's blood went cold. Sherman Wade. The name conjured memories of blood and gunfire, of a battlefield littered with bodies, of a hand reaching down to pull him from death's grasp. I owe you my life, Colonel, he had told Wade as they lay in the field hospital. Then live it well, Captain Morgan, Wade had replied. We've survived to build this country from the ashes. Now, 11 years later, Wade's name appeared in connection with a senator's assassination and a wounded woman who had sought refuge on Eli's isolated ranch. Eli checked his guns and ammunition, then dragged a chair to the window, where he could watch both the cabin door and the yard beyond. If trouble was coming, he would be ready. Sarah murmured restlessly in her fever sleep. Outside, the storm gathered strength, wind howling around the cabin's eaves, like the ghosts of Gettysburg coming to collect an old debt. Dawn broke with sullen reluctance, gray light seeping through cloud cover that hung low over Silver Creek Valley. The storm had passed, leaving mud and fallen branches in its wake. Eli, who had dozed fitfully in the chair by the window, rose stiffly to check on his unexpected guest. Sarah Carpenter's face was flushed with fever, her breathing rapid and shallow. The bandage on her shoulder showed spots of fresh blood. Eli placed a cool cloth on her forehead, causing her eyes to flutter open briefly. "Father," she whispered. "Rest," Eli said, his voice gentler than he'd used in years. "You're safe for now." Her eyes closed again. Eli changed her bandage, noting with concern the angry red streaks beginning to radiate from the wound. Infection. He'd seen it too many times during the war, men surviving bullets only to be claimed by the fever that followed. He mixed a poultice of herbs gathered from the mountainside, an old remedy taught to him by a medicine woman years ago. As he worked, his mind kept returning to the note he'd found. Wade knows. The implication was clear enough. Sherman Wade, once his commanding officer and savior, was somehow involved in Senator Carpenter's death. A memory surfaced, Wade standing tall amid cannon smoke at Gettysburg, blood streaking his face, eyes alight with the fervor of battle. "We fight not just for Union Morgan, but for the future we'll build after." Had that future included murdering senators who stood in his way? Eli shook his head. He was jumping to conclusions. Wade had been ambitious, ruthless even, but a murderer of civilians. The man had been his mentor, had saved his life. Such accusations required more than a hastily scrawled note. After applying the poultice to Sarah's wound, Eli stepped outside to check his property. The muddy ground revealed what he'd feared: boot prints circling the cabin multiple sets. Someone had been watching during the night. They hadn't approached the cabin directly, but they'd been there studying, waiting. Returning inside, Eli gathered supplies, ammunition, dried meat, hardtack medical supplies. If trouble was coming, better to be prepared. He was checking his Winchester repeater when a soft voice came from the bed. "You're him, aren't you, from the photograph?" Eli turned to find Sarah Carpenter watching him with fevered but lucid eyes. "What photograph?" "In my father's study, you and Colonel Wade at Gettysburg. The heroes." Her voice carried a bitter edge on the last word. Eli set the rifle down. "That was a long time ago." "Not so long." Sarah struggled to sit up, wincing. "My father trusted you once. He said you were the only honest man in Wade's command." Eli helped her up, supporting her back with a folded blanket. "Your father and I met years ago. I was just a captain then. I was just a girl." Sarah's eyes never left his face, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "He said if Wade had 10 men like you, he might have become a force for good instead of—" She trailed off, coughing. Eli offered her water, which she drank gratefully. "Your father was investigating Wade," he stated rather than asked. Sarah nodded, then reached for her jacket, which Eli had hung near the fire to dry. "There's something inside the lining. A journal." Eli retrieved the jacket, finding a small, leather-bound notebook sewn into the lining. He cut it free and handed it to Sarah. "It's coded," she explained, leafing through pages filled with seemingly random letters and numbers. "Only my father and I know how to read it. It documents everything: the bribes, the forced land sales, the treaty violations. Wade is building an empire on stolen land and broken laws. The railroad is just the beginning. And your father was going to expose him to the governor." "Yes, Wade found out somehow." Her voice caught. "He sent Hawkins to kill him." "Hawkins, John Hawkins, Wade's enforcer, former cavalry. I believe he—" Sarah faltered, tears welling. "I saw him shoot my father through the window. I took the journal and ran." Eli's jaw tightened. John Hawkins, another ghost from Gettysburg, and a lieutenant who had followed Wade's orders with unquestioning brutality. "I need to get to the governor," Sarah continued, fighting through her emotion, "before Wade realizes I have the journal." "You're in no condition to travel," Eli said. "That wound is infected, and you need rest." "There's no time. Wade will have to come through me first," Eli interrupted, surprising himself with the vehemence in his voice. He hadn't intended to get involved in whatever this was, yet here he stood making declarations. Sarah studied him, her feverish gaze penetrating. "Why would you help me? You owe Wade your life. Everyone knows that story." The question struck deeper than she could know. Why indeed Eli had spent years avoiding entanglements, building walls between himself and a world that had taken everything from him. "I owe Wade for pulling me from that field," Eli said slowly. "But if he's behind your father's murder, that debt no longer stands." He paused, the weight of his next words settling heavily. Besides, I owe your father too, it seems. What do you mean? Eli's gaze drifted to the window to the mountains beyond. After the war, I wasn't right. The things I'd seen done, my wife and son died of fever while I was drowning myself in whiskey and cards. His voice roughened with shame. Your father was circuit judge then. Found me in a cell after a brawl. Instead of sending me to prison, he gave me a chance. Helped me secure this land. Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes. That's why he trusted you. Why he kept that photograph. Eli nodded, then moved to the window, scanning the tree line. No movement, but the sense of being watched persisted. We can't stay here, he decided. My monthly supply run to Silver Creek is due. No one would question me riding in. I can send a telegram to the governor from there. I'm coming with you, Sarah insisted. You can barely stand. I'll manage. The journal stays with me. Before Eli could argue further, he noticed something by the barn, a flash of metal catching the morning light. He moved swiftly to Sarah's side, pressing her down into the bed. Don't move, he whispered. Grabbing his rifle, he positioned himself beside the window out of sight. Through a small gap in the curtains, he watched as a rider emerged from the tree line, approaching slowly. The man wore a long duster, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. A cavalry carbine rested against his saddle. The rider circled the yard, once studying the ground. He dismounted by the storage shed, examining the area where Eli had found Sarah. After a moment, he remounted and rode directly to the cabin, stopping 30 yards from the porch. Morgan, the rider called. I know you're in there, and I know who you're harboring. Eli's grip tightened on his rifle. What do you want? He called back. Just a conversation about old times and new troubles. Identify yourself. The rider pushed his hat back, revealing a face Eli hadn't seen in years, but recognized instantly John Hawkins, older now, with a scar running from temple to jaw that hadn't been there during the war. Lieutenant Hawkins, Eli acknowledged coldly. Captain Morgan, Hawkins replied with a mock salute. It's been too long. Not long enough, Hawkins chuckled. Still the same Morgan. Listen, I'm here on behalf of an old friend. Colonel Wade sends his regards. Beside Eli, Sarah had risen silently to peer through the window. Her face paled at the sight of Hawkins. That's him, she whispered. My father's killer. Eli placed a steadying hand on her arm. Stay back, he murmured, then addressed Hawkins again. What does Wade want? Just what belongs to him, the carpenter girl, and whatever she stole. Hawkins' voice hardened. Don't make this difficult, Morgan. Wade hasn't forgotten what he did for you at Gettysburg. He's calling in the debt. The words struck Eli like physical blows. He had feared this moment for years, the day his debt to Wade would become a chain around his neck. The woman is injured, Eli called back. She needs a doctor, not a hangman. Wade will ensure she receives care. You have my word. Your word? Eli couldn't keep the contempt from his voice. I saw what your word did to Senator Carpenter. Hawkins's posture changed, hand drifting toward his holster. Careful, Morgan. That sounds like an accusation. Take it how you will. A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant cry of a hawk. Finally, Hawkins spoke again. Wade respects you, Morgan. That's why I came alone as a courtesy. But if you don't surrender the girl and whatever she's carrying, by sundown others will come. Many others. He reached into his coat and withdrew an arrow which he cast onto the ground before the cabin. And not just Wade's men. The implication was clear. Somehow, Wade had enlisted the aid of hostile native warriors, a devastating alliance against an isolated ranch. Sundown, Morgan, Hawkins repeated, turning his horse. For old time's sake, I hope you make the right choice. As Hawkins rode away, Eli remained at the window until the rider disappeared into the trees. Only then did he lower his rifle. He'll be back, Sarah said, her voice surprisingly steady despite her fever. With others? Eli nodded grimly. Then we need to be gone before then. He glanced at her pale face, the bandage on her shoulder now spotted with blood from her exertion. Can you ride? I'll have to, won't I? Her determination impressed him. Senator Carpenter had raised a daughter with his own steel spine. We'll leave within the hour, Eli decided. Pack only what's essential. We'll take the mountain trails to Silver Creek. Wade's men will expect us to head for Denver directly. Sarah nodded, clutching her father's journal. Thank you, she said quietly. I know what this means, defying Wade. Eli turned away, unable to meet her gaze. She couldn't possibly know what it meant. Wade had not only saved his life, but had given him purpose when he'd been lost in the chaos of war. For years, Eli had defined himself by that debt, had used it to justify the blood on his hands from following Wade's orders. Now he was choosing to stand against the man who had pulled him from death's grasp. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was repaying life with betrayal. As he gathered supplies, Eli's eye caught the wooden box containing his Medal of Honor. He opened it one last time, staring at the tarnished metal that represented both glory and shame. After a moment's hesitation, he left it on the table. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't be returning to this cabin as the same man who had left it. Outside, clouds gathered again on the horizon, dark and ominous. A storm was coming, and not just the kind that brought rain. The mountain trail twisted like a wounded serpent, narrow and treacherous. Eli rode ahead, constantly scanning for danger, while Sarah followed on a gentle mare, her face drawn with pain, but determined. They had left the ranch less than an hour after Hawkins's departure, taking only essentials, weapons, food, medical supplies, and the precious journal hidden inside Sarah's coat. The higher elevation offered both protection and challenges. Few would expect them to take such a difficult route in Sarah's condition, but the thin air and rough terrain taxed her wounded body. Twice already, Eli had needed to help her back onto her horse after she'd swayed dangerously in the saddle. "We'll rest here," Eli announced, indicating a small plateau sheltered by pines. It offered a clear view of the trail behind them while providing cover. Sarah didn't protest, a testament to her exhaustion. As Eli helped her dismount, he felt the heat of fever through her clothing. "The infection's getting worse," he said, supporting her weight as she sank to the ground. "I've had worse," she replied, though her voice belied the claim. Eli raised an eyebrow. "Have you now?" A ghost of a smile crossed her pale face. "Perhaps not, but I imagine you have." While Sarah rested against a tree trunk, Eli tended the horses and prepared a small fire sheltered to minimize visible smoke. The late April air carried mountain chill, and Sarah needed warmth more than they needed absolute secrecy. Besides, if Wade had indeed enlisted hostile scouts, as Hawkins implied, concealment would be nearly impossible. As he worked, Eli found himself studying Sarah Carpenter. Despite her injury and exhaustion, there was an unmistakable resilience in her bearing, not the fragile society woman he might have expected from a senator's daughter, but someone accustomed to standing her ground. "Your father," Eli said as he handed her a tin cup of hot coffee laced with whiskey for the pain. "He raised you alone." Sarah accepted the cup with trembling hands. "Since I was 12, my mother died of consumption." She sipped the bitter liquid, grimacing at the alcohol. "Father believed women deserved education equal to men. He hired tutors, encouraged my interest in law and politics." Unconventional. He was an unconventional man. Sadness crept into her voice. "After the war, he became passionate about corruption. Said we hadn't fought to preserve the Union, just to let greed tear it apart again." Eli nodded, poking at the small fire. "Your father was right about that much." "He spoke of you sometimes." Sarah continued, watching him over the rim of her cup. "Said you were one of the few men under Wade who questioned orders when they crossed lines." Discomfort tightened Eli's shoulders. "Your father gave me more credit than I deserved." "Did he?" Sarah's gaze was penetrating despite her fever. "Is that why you're helping me now, Conscience?" Eli didn't answer immediately. The question cut too close to matters he'd spent years avoiding. Finally, he said, "Let's just say I've seen enough good men die for bad causes." He moved to check their back trail, grateful for the excuse to escape her scrutiny. From their elevated position, he could see for miles across the valley. No sign of pursuit yet, but they'd left clear tracks despite his efforts. It wouldn't take an experienced tracker long to follow. When he returned, Sarah had opened her father's journal, studying its encoded pages with intense concentration. "Can you actually read that?" Eli asked. She nodded. "Father and I developed the cipher together after my mother died. It became our special language." Her finger traced lines of seemingly random letters. "This section details Wade's first land acquisitions after the war using forged documents, bribing county clerks. And this was enough to get your father killed." "No, there." Sarah turned pages until she reached newer entries. "This was evidence of Wade's negotiations with the native tribes." His voice hardened. "He's promising them protection and recognition of land rights, while simultaneously filing claims on those same lands. When the railroad goes through, the tribes who resist will be blamed for attacks, giving the army reason to move against them." Eli's jaw tightened. He'd seen similar strategies during his military career, creating pretexts for action against tribes who stood in the way of progress. There's more, Sarah continued, her voice dropping. Wade has investors, powerful men back east, senators, judges. My father discovered Wade has been blackmailing some of them to secure their support. That explains the urgency to silence him. Sarah nodded grimly. And to find this journal, it names names. Captain Morgan. Eli, he corrected automatically. I haven't been captain in a long time. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken understanding passing between them. They were both more than the roles assigned to them, he more than an ex-soldier, she more than a senator's daughter. The moment was broken by the distant crack of a branch. Eli was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, motioning Sarah to silence. He moved to the edge of their small clearing, scanning the forest below. For several long minutes, nothing moved except pine boughs stirring in the breeze. Then a flash of color between trees, too deliberate for wildlife. We need to move, Eli whispered, returning to Sarah. Someone's coming up the trail. They doused the fire and mounted quickly, Sarah biting her lip against the pain. Instead of continuing on the trail, Eli led them higher into the rocky terrain where tracking would be more difficult. Where are we going? Sarah asked, her voice strained. There's an old mining camp 2 miles north, Eli replied. Abandoned years ago. We can shelter there until dark, then continue to Silver Creek under cover of night. They rode in tense silence, Eli constantly checking behind them. The pursuit remained distant, but persistent, occasional glimpses of riders following their general direction rather than their specific trail. Whoever tracked them was skilled but cautious, maintaining distance while keeping them in sight. As they crested a ridge, Sarah suddenly gasped. Eli followed her gaze to the valley below, where a column of black smoke rose from a small settlement nestled among the pines. What is that place? Sarah asked. Eli's face darkened. Homesteader settlement. Swedish immigrants. They arrived last spring. Without discussion, they altered course toward the burning settlement. As they drew closer, the destruction became clear. Cabins, smoldering fences, broken livestock scattered or slaughtered. No people were visible, but dark shapes on the ground suggested the worst. Stay here, Eli ordered, when they reached the edge of the settlement, dismounting and drawing his rifle. No, Sarah responded firmly, sliding carefully from her horse. I need to see. I need to know what Wade is capable of. Eli didn't argue. Perhaps she did need to see to understand fully what they faced. The settlement had been home to perhaps 30 people, 6 or 7 families. Now it was a graveyard. Men lay where they had fallen, defending their homes. Women and children. Eli guided Sarah away from the worst scenes, his face grim. This wasn't just murder, he said quietly. This was a message. For whom? Anyone on who stands in Wade's way. Eli surveyed the destruction. These people refused to sell their land claims. The valley provides the only practical route for the railroad through this section of mountains. A weak cough drew their attention to one of the partially collapsed cabins. Eli approached cautiously, rifle ready, motioning Sarah to stay back. Inside, an elderly man lay trapped beneath fallen timbers, blood staining his white beard. Eli knelt beside him, speaking softly in the Swedish he'd learned from neighbors years earlier. The man's eyes flickered with surprise, then relief at being understood. Water, Eli called to Sarah, who quickly brought a canteen. After drinking feebly, the old man clutched Eli's sleeve. In halting English, he gasped out his account. Men had come at dawn, some white, some native. They demanded the settlers leave immediately. When refused, they attacked without mercy. Leader, tall man, scar on face, the old man wheezed, called him Colonel. Eli and Sarah exchanged glances. Wade himself had led the attack. Governor promised protection. The old man continued, each word a struggle. Papers, legal papers. Your land claims were legal, Sarah assured him, kneeling opposite Eli. This attack was not. The man's eyes fixed on her, recognition dawning. You, Senator's daughter, he spoke here, promised justice. Sarah nodded, tears welling. Yes, my father visited you, said he would stop the railroad men. His breathing grew more labored. Too late now. Eli could see the man had minutes at most. Is there anyone else, any survivors? Children, hiding in root cellar, Erickson Farm. His fingers dug into Eli's arm with surprising strength. Promise. Take them to safety. I promise, Eli said solemnly. The old man's grip relaxed, his eyes finding some distant point beyond them. "Her good land," he whispered. "Lord, receive my soul," and was gone. Eli closed the man's eyes, then stood. "We need to find those children and leave. Whoever did this might return." They found the Erickson farm on the settlement's north edge, partially burned, but with its root cellar intact. Inside, 5 children huddled in terrified silence, the oldest no more than 12, the youngest barely walking. Coaxing them out took precious time. They spoke little English, and only the oldest boy, Eric, could explain what had happened. His account matched the old man's with a chilling addition: the attackers had been laughing as they killed. "Wade has changed," Eli said quietly to Sarah, as they led the traumatized children back to their horses. "The man I knew was harsh, even ruthless in war. But this," he shook his head, "this is something else." "Power corrupts," Sarah replied, her face ashen from the horrific scenes and her own worsening condition. "And my father was about to take it all away." Organizing the children onto their 2 horses created a new challenge. The oldest boy could ride behind Eli, and Sarah, despite her injury, insisted she could manage with the smallest child. The remaining 3 would need to walk alongside. "Silver Creek is still 8 miles, Eli calculated. With the children, we won't make it before dark." "Those men are still tracking us," Sarah reminded him. "We can't stay here." Eli nodded grimly. "We'll have to risk the main trail. It's easier walking for the children." It was a dangerous choice. The main trail offered faster travel but greater exposure. If Wade's men were watching the routes to Silver Creek, they'd be spotted easily. They had traveled perhaps 2 miles when Eric, riding behind Eli, suddenly stiffened. "Retar," he whispered. "Riders." Eli reined in, scanning the trail ahead where it curved around a rock outcropping. Not yet visible, but the boy's sharp ears had caught the sounds of approaching horses. "Off the trail," Eli ordered quietly, guiding them into the dense pines. They dismounted, hushing the frightened children as the sounds of horses grew louder. From their concealment, they watched as a group of riders came into view. 3 white men and 2 native scouts, all armed, moving at a deliberate pace. Eli recognized the lead rider, Samuel Reed, once a sergeant in Wade's company, now apparently one of his enforcers. The men studied the ground as they rode, clearly tracking. When they reached the point where Eli's party had left the trail, they stopped. "They split up here," Reed called to the others. "Morgan's being careful." One of the native scouts dismounted, examining the ground. "Woman still bleeding," he announced, "and they move slow. Children with them now." Reed cursed. "Survivors from the settlement. Wade won't be happy." He considered for a moment. "Jensen, ride back and report. Tell the colonel we'll continue to Silver Creek. Morgan's got nowhere else to go." One rider departed while the others continued down the trail, passing within 30 yards of where Eli, Sarah, and the children hid among the pines. When they were gone, Eli released a long breath. "They know where we're headed." "What do we do?" Sarah asked. The small child clutched protectively to her chest despite her injured shoulder. Eli considered their options, none of them good. Going to Silver Creek meant walking into a trap. Turning back meant facing the wilderness with 5 children and a wounded woman. Continuing cross-country would be slow and equally dangerous. His gaze settled on the distant peaks where late afternoon sun glinted on snow. Beyond those mountains lay tribal territory, not the corrupted scouts working for Wade, but the main tribe under Chief Night Sky. Years ago, Eli had prevented a massacre of women and children during a punitive expedition gone wrong. He'd earned both enemies and allies that day. "We need to change course," he decided. "There's a village beyond those mountains. If we can reach it, we might find help." Sarah's eyes widened. "The tribe, after what we just saw at the settlement?" "Those were renegades. Scouts Wade has bought. The main tribe under Night Sky honors its agreements." Eli wasn't entirely confident of this, but it was their best hope. "I have history with them. It might help us." "What kind of history?" Sarah asked skeptically. Eli avoided her gaze. "Complicated history." Before she could press further, the smallest child began crying. The sound, though soft, seemed to echo through the forest. The other children looked to Eli with frightened eyes. "We need to move," he said, lifting the crying child from Sarah's arms. "Can you manage the horse?" Sarah nodded, though her face was alarmingly pale. The fever was worsening, her wounded shoulder now hot to the touch. They continued through the forest, parallel to the trail, but hidden within the trees. Progress was agonizingly slow. The walking children tired quickly, and twice Sarah nearly fell from her saddle. By sunset, they had covered less than 3 miles, and the mountain pass Eli aimed for remained distant. As darkness fell, Eli found a sheltered hollow where a lightning-struck pine had created a natural lean-to of fallen timber. It would have to do for the night. Sarah collapsed when Eli helped her dismount, her legs buckling beneath her. Her skin burned with fever, and when he checked her wound, he found the infection had worsened significantly, angry red streaks extending from her shoulder down her arm. "How bad?" she asked, reading his expression. "You need a doctor. Not an option at the moment." Despite everything, a hint of wry humor colored her voice. "Your tribal friends, do they have healers?" "Yes, if we can reach them." While the exhausted children huddled together beneath blankets, Eli prepared a poultice for Sarah's wound, his knowledge of frontier medicine limited, but better than nothing. "Tell me about Wade," Sarah said, as he worked, her voice strained but determined. "I need to understand the man we're facing." Eli's hands stilled momentarily. It was a subject he'd avoided for years, even in his own thoughts. "Sherman Wade was the most brilliant officer I served under," he finally said, resuming his work. "Fearless, inspiring. Men would follow him anywhere, including you, especially me." Eli's voice grew distant with memory. "I was 24 when the war started. Idealistic. Wade recognized something in me, took me under his wing. By Gettysburg, I was his most trusted captain." Sarah watched him intently despite her pain. And then he saved my life." Eli applied the poultice to her wound, causing her to wince. "Sorry, I took a Confederate bayonet at Cemetery Ridge. Would have bled out, but Wade carried me off the field under heavy fire. Took a bullet in the process." He paused. "The scar your Swedish friend mentioned, that was for me. That creates a powerful bond." "Yes." Eli wrapped fresh bandages around her shoulder. "After the war, Wade talked about building the future railroads, industries, cities where there had been wilderness. His vision was compelling." "What happened?" Eli's expression darkened. "His methods changed. Or perhaps I changed. The tactics that worked in war, he brought them to business. Those who opposed him became enemies to be eliminated. Like my father." "Like your father," Eli agreed grimly. "I left his service after an incident with the farming community in Kansas. Wade wanted their land for a rail depot. When they refused to sell, he did what he did to the Swedish settlement," Sarah concluded. Eli nodded. "I couldn't be part of that, so I walked away, thought I could leave it all behind." He secured the bandage and sat back. "Until you arrived." Sarah held his gaze. "Do you regret helping me?" "No." The answer came without hesitation, surprising them both. "Whatever debt I owed Wade, it doesn't justify what he's become." A small voice interrupted them. Eric, the oldest boy. "Mister, is bad men coming?" Eli turned to the child, seeing the fear in his eyes. "Not tonight," he assured him, hoping it was true. "Try to sleep." As the boy returned to the other children, Eli checked his weapons and prepared for a long night watch. Sarah insisted on taking the journal from its hiding place in her coat, working by moonlight to decode more of its contents. "Wade's entire operation is detailed here," she said after a while. "Land deals, bribes, even murders disguised as accidents." She looked up at Eli. "This is what my father died for, this evidence. And what you might die for if we don't get you proper care soon." Eli replied, concern evident in his voice. Sarah managed a weak smile. "Then we'd better reach your tribal friends quickly." They fell into silence, the gravity of their situation settling over them like the darkness itself. The children slept fitfully, occasionally whimpering in dreams haunted by the day's horrors. Sarah eventually succumbed to exhaustion, the journal clutched against her chest. Eli remained awake, watching the forest. The moon cast silver light through the pines, creating shifting patterns that played tricks on vigilant eyes. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound amplified in the mountain stillness. Near midnight, the horses grew restless, sensing something Eli couldn't yet perceive. He moved silently to the edge of their small camp, rifle ready. For long minutes, nothing moved. Then a shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness between trees. Another followed, and another. Native warriors, at least 5 of them, approaching silently from multiple directions. Not Wade's scouts, but warriors in traditional dress, faces painted for battle. Eli didn't raise his rifle. Such a gesture would only ensure their deaths. Instead, he straightened, facing the nearest warrior, and spoke in the tribal language he had laboriously learned years ago. "I seek passage to Night Sky's village," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I come in peace with children who need protection." The warriors paused, surprised by the white man speaking their tongue. The leader stepped forward, moonlight revealing a face marked with ritual scars. "The White Father sends soldiers against our people," he replied in his language. "Yet you claim peace." "I am not the White Father's man," Eli responded. "I am Morgan, who once stood against his own kind to protect your women and children." Recognition flickered in the warrior's eyes. Morgan, the one they call Ghost Soldier. Eli nodded, relieved at the recognition. Ghost Soldier was the name given to him by the tribe after the incident years ago. The warrior approached closer, his gaze moving from Eli to the sleeping forms of Sarah and the children. "These are not your children," he observed. "Their families were killed by men who served Sherman Wade, the railroad chief. The woman fights against Wade. She carries evidence of his crimes, but she is wounded and sick." The warrior considered this information, then spoke rapidly to his companions in a dialect Eli couldn't follow. After a brief discussion, he turned back to Eli. "Night Sky will want to speak with the woman who fights the railroad chief." He made a sharp gesture. "You will come with us." "The woman cannot travel far," Eli cautioned. "The infection grows worse." "Wildflower will help her," the warrior replied. "She learned healing from the missionaries before they were driven away." Eli remembered Wildflower, a young tribal woman he had saved during that long-ago confrontation. The fact that she was still remembered with the tribe seemed a favorable sign. "We will come," Eli agreed. "If you give your word, the children will not be harmed." The warrior touched his chest in a gesture of oath. "Children are sacred to the people, even white children. They will be safe." As Eli turned to wake Sarah and the children, the warrior spoke again, his voice carrying a warning. "Ghost Soldier should know the railroad chief has offered many rifles to any who bring him the woman and her papers. Some of our young men have taken his offer." He glanced meaningfully into the forest. "We must move quickly. Others may be watching." Eli nodded grimly. The web Wade had woven was extensive, reaching even into the native nation. Their journey to safety had just become even more perilous. Behind him, Sarah stirred, her eyes opening to the sight of warriors surrounding their camp. Her hand moved instinctively for her father's journal. "It's all right," Eli assured her quietly. "They're taking us to their village, to safety." "Safety, Sarah repeated, her fever-bright eyes moving from the warriors to Eli's face. "Is there such a thing anymore, Captain Morgan?" Eli had no answer for her. In a world where Sherman Wade wielded power like a weapon, safety was perhaps only an illusion, a temporary refuge before the storm broke again. Dawn painted the mountains in hues of amber and gold, as the warriors led Eli, Sarah, and the children through a narrow path unknown to most white settlers. They traveled in silence, the warriors constantly alert, moving with the fluid grace of those born to this rugged terrain. Two of the warriors carried the smallest children, while Eric and the others walked beside Eli, wide-eyed with fear and wonder. Sarah rode between two warriors slumped forward in the saddle. The night's journey had depleted her remaining strength, and the infection from her wound now raged through her body. Occasionally she murmured deliriously, clutching at the hidden journal inside her coat. Their guide, who had introduced himself as Grey Wolf, led them along a path that seemed to disappear and reappear among the rocks, invisible to untrained eyes. He had explained that the tribal village lay in a hidden valley beyond the ridge, a sanctuary not yet violated by white encroachment. As they crested the final rise, Eli's breath caught. Below stretched a pristine valley bisected by a clear stream that glinted like silver in the morning light. The tribal village occupied the valley's heart, dozens of structures ranging from traditional hide lodges to more permanent wooden dwellings, evidence of the tribe's adaptation to changing circumstances while maintaining their core identity. "Night Sky keeps old ways and new together," Grey Wolf explained, noting Eli's surprise at the village's sophistication. "We learn white man's tools, but keep our heart." Children playing near the village perimeter spotted their approach and ran to alert the adults. By the time they reached the first dwellings, a crowd had gathered, men, women, and children, regarding the strangers with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. A path cleared through the crowd as an elderly man emerged, tall, despite his years, with a deeply lined face that spoke of wisdom earned through hardship. Chief Night Sky wore a blend of traditional garments and items of European origin, a beaded vest over a cotton shirt with an eagle feather adorning his long gray hair. Gray Wolf stepped forward, speaking rapidly in the tribal language, explaining their presence. The chief listened impassively, his dark eyes moving from Eli to Sarah and finally to the Swedish children huddled together like frightened deer. When Gray Wolf finished, Night Sky approached Eli directly. "So," he said in perfect accented English, "Ghost Soldier returns to us." Eli inclined his head respectfully. "I come seeking refuge, Chief Night Sky, for the woman who fights against those who would steal your land and for these children whose parents were murdered by the Iron Horseman." Night Sky nodded. "We have heard of this Sherman Wade. He sends men with gifts and promises to some of our bands." His expression hardened. "Those who accept betray our people." Behind them, Sarah suddenly slid from her horse unconscious. Eli rushed to her side, finding her burning with fever, her breathing shallow. "She needs help," he urged, looking up at Night Sky. Gray Wolf mentioned someone called Wildflower. Night Sky studied Sarah's pale face, then turned to the crowd and called out a command. A young woman stepped forward, perhaps 30, with intelligent eyes and an air of quiet confidence. She wore her hair in a single braid down her back, her dress a mixture of tribal and European styles. She knelt beside Sarah, examining the wound with practiced hands. "The infection is deep," she said in English, as fluent as the chief's. "I will do what I can, but she needs strong medicine." Wildflower, Eli acknowledged, recognition dawning. The frightened girl he'd saved years ago had grown into a self-possessed woman. "You remember me?" Her eyes met his unreadable. "I remember," he said simply, then directed several younger women to help carry Sarah to her lodge. As they bore Sarah away, Eli moved to follow, but Night Sky's hand on his arm stopped him. "First we talk," the chief said firmly. "Your woman will be cared for. The children also." He gestured toward a large central lodge. "Come, many questions must be answered." Eli hesitated, torn between staying with Sarah and respecting the chief's authority. Finally, he nodded, instructing Eric to watch over the younger children and promising to return soon. Inside Night Sky's lodge, several tribal elders had already gathered around a central fire. Eli was directed to sit in the position of honor, a gesture that surprised him given the complicated history between them. "Some here remember you only as a bluecoat who killed our brothers," Night Sky began without preamble once they were seated. "Others remember you as the one who stood against his own people to protect our women and children. Which man are you now, Ghost Soldier?" The directness of the question struck Eli like a physical blow. It was the same question he'd been asking himself since Sarah Carpenter had appeared at his ranch. "I am a man seeking to make right what I once did wrong," he answered carefully. "I no longer serve the army or Sherman Wade." One of the elders spoke sharply in their language. Night Sky translated. "Running Bear asks why we should trust any white man when the paper promises of your government turn to dust." "You shouldn't trust me because I'm white," Eli acknowledged. "Judge me by my actions, past and present." Night Sky seemed satisfied with this answer. "Tell us of the woman and what she carries that makes the Iron Horseman hunt her like a wounded deer." Eli explained about Senator Carpenter's investigation, the journal documenting Wade's crimes and Sarah's desperate flight. He described the Swedish settlement massacre and Wade's apparent alliance with renegade tribal scouts. "The woman's father sought to expose Wade's plan to take your lands despite the treaties," he concluded. "That's why he was killed. That's why Wade wants the journal. It contains evidence that would ruin him and his powerful friends." The elders conferred among themselves, their expressions grave. Finally, Night Sky addressed Eli again. "This woman fights our battle as well as her own," he acknowledged. "For this we will help her. But there is danger in your presence here. If Wade's tribal scouts track you to our village—" "I understand," Eli said. "Once Sarah is well enough to travel, we'll continue to Denver to reach the governor." Night Sky shook his head. "The passes to Denver are watched. Wade's men control the trails." He studied Eli thoughtfully. "There is another way, but it requires trust between us." "What way?" "We have a white man who lives among us. A medicine man who came after the war seeking peace. He travels to white settlements to trade and heal. He could take your evidence to this governor." Eli considered the proposal. Entrusting the journal to a stranger went against every instinct, yet their options were dwindling as Sarah's condition worsened. "I would need to meet this man," he said finally. Night Sky nodded. "He returns tomorrow from the North Valleys. Until then, rest. Your journey has been long." He rose, signaling the end of the council. Wildflower will care for your woman. The children will stay with Blue Sky's family. They lost children to the white man's spotted fever and have room in their hearts. As they exited the lodge, Night Sky placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. Ghost soldier, he said quietly. Many years ago, you chose the right path when it was difficult. Remember that man if darkness comes again. The chief's words followed Eli as he made his way to Wildflower's lodge where Sarah had been taken. The structure stood slightly apart from the others, larger, with a small garden of medicinal plants growing beside it. Inside, he found Sarah lying on a bed of soft furs, her fevered face ghostly in the dim light. Wildflower sat beside her, preparing a poultice of herbs that filled the air with its sharp medicinal scent. Will she live? Eli asked without preamble. Wildflower continued her work without looking up. The fever fights within her. She is strong, but the infection is strong also. She finally raised her eyes to his. You care for this woman. It wasn't a question, but Eli felt compelled to answer. She's fighting for justice for people like those Swedish settlers. For your people, too. And you, what do you fight for, Ghost Soldier? The question echoed Night Sky's earlier challenge. Redemption, maybe, he admitted. For the things I did and the things I failed to do. Wildflower nodded as if his answer confirmed something she already knew. The whites at the fort called you Wade's hammer, she said, applying the poultice to Sarah's wound. They said you followed his orders without question, that you were as cold as winter. Eli flinched at the old nickname. That was a different man. Was it? Her eyes held his unflinching. The ghost soldier who saved my people, he appeared in an instant, like a spirit stepping from one world into another. What changed in that moment? Eli had never spoken of that day, not to anyone. The memories remained razor-sharp despite the passing years, the punitive expedition against a tribal band accused of raiding Wade's orders to make an example of the village. The moment when Eli had seen Wildflower, then just a child clutching a doll made of corn, husks, her eyes wide with terror. I saw a child who looked like my son, he said, the words coming unbidden. The son I'd left behind to fight in the war. The son who died while I was away. He swallowed hard. And suddenly I couldn't do it anymore, couldn't keep pretending we were bringing civilization instead of destruction. Wildflower absorbed his words silently, then turned back to Sarah. Your woman calls for you in her fever dreams. She speaks of her father, of Wade, and of you, the man she believes will bring justice. She overestimates me. Perhaps, or perhaps she sees what you could be, not just what you were still. Wildflower handed him a small clay cup. Give her this when she wakes. It will help with the pain and fever. As Wildflower rose to leave, Eli caught her sleeve. Thank you for helping us despite everything. She regarded him with those unreadable eyes. I help because once you helped my people when it cost you everything. Debts must be repaid. This is universal law. After she left, Eli sat beside Sarah, watching the shallow rise and fall of her chest. In the filtered light of the lodge, with her golden hair spread across the furs, she looked both vulnerable and indomitable, a woman who had risked everything for her father's cause. Outside, he could hear the sounds of village life continuing, children playing, women calling to one another, the rhythmic pounding of someone working leather normal sounds that belied the danger surrounding them. Sarah stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, confusion clouded her gaze. Then recognition dawned. Eli, she whispered, her voice weak. Where are we? Tribal village. You're being cared for. He helped her drink from the cup Wildflower had left. The children are safe too. She grimaced at the bitter taste but drank dutifully. The journal, still with you. He nodded toward her coat folded nearby with the precious document hidden inside. No one has touched it. Relief crossed her face. Good. She studied their surroundings. These people, can we trust them? I believe so. Their chief has no love for Wade or his methods. Sarah's hand found his, her fingers burning with fever. My father trusted you, she said, her voice stronger. I questioned that at first, but now I understand why. Eli looked away, uncomfortable with her faith in him. Your father didn't know everything about me. He knew enough. Her grip tightened. Promise me something, Captain Morgan. What? If I don't survive this fever. You will, he interrupted firmly. If I don't, she insisted, promise you will get the journal to Governor Rote. Promise the truth will come out. Eli met her gaze steadily. I promise, he said, meaning it more deeply than any oath he'd sworn before even his military commission. But it won't come to that. You're stronger than any fever. A ghost of a smile touched her lips before her eyes drifted closed again, the medicine drawing her back into sleep. Eli remained at her side until sunset when Wildflower returned to check Sarah's condition. The healer seemed cautiously optimistic, noting that the angry red streaks had receded slightly from Sarah's arm. The white medicine man will bring stronger remedies when he returns tomorrow, she assured Eli. Until then, she needs rest, as do you. Reluctantly, Eli left Sarah in Wildflower's care and went to check on the Swedish children. He found them in a large family lodge, being fussed over by a middle-aged tribal woman who was attempting to coax them to eat unfamiliar food. Eric, still wary but less frightened than before, translated her gestures for the younger children. "Are we safe here, Mr. Morgan?" the boy asked as Eli crouched beside him. "For now," Eli replied honestly. "These people have been kind to take us in." "The Indians killed my friend's family last summer," Eric said, his young face solemn. "Father said not all Indians are the same, just like not all white men are the same. Was he right?" "Your father was a wise man," Eli said, feeling the weight of the boy's trust. "People are people, good and bad in all kinds." "Will we ever go home again?" The question cut deep. Home. Such a simple word for something so profound. Something these children had lost forever. "We'll find you a new home," Eli promised, hoping it wasn't an empty vow. "Somewhere safe." After ensuring the children were settled, Eli was shown to a small lodge where he could rest. Exhaustion overtook him almost immediately, the events of the past days catching up in a rush. His sleep was deep but troubled, filled with fractured dreams of Battle of Wade's face twisted in fury, of Sarah falling endlessly beyond his reach. He woke before dawn to the sound of horses entering the village. Many horses moving at speed. Grabbing his gun belt, Eli emerged from the lodge to find the village in commotion. Warriors were gathering near the central fire, weapons in hand. Grey Wolf appeared at his side. Riders approached from the south. Many riders, Wade's men, some white, some from our tribe. Grey Wolf's expression was grim. "They demand we surrender you the woman and what she carries." Eli buckled on his gun belt. "How did they find us?" The warrior's silence was answer enough. Someone had betrayed their location. Someone within the tribe. Night Sky emerged from his lodge, his aged face set with determination. "We have prepared for this day," he told Eli, "when whites come with guns to take what is not theirs." "This isn't your fight," Eli protested. "We can leave. Draw them away from your people." "It became our fight when Wade made promises he never intended to keep," Night Sky replied, "when he sent our own to kill our own for his Iron Road." A young warrior ran up, speaking urgently to Night Sky. The chief's expression darkened further. "They have surrounded the valley," he translated for Eli. "Many guns. Their leader says they will attack at sunrise if we do not surrender you." "Their leader? Is it Wade himself?" Night Sky shook his head. "A man called Hawkins. He says he speaks for Wade." Hawkins, the senator's assassin, the man who had delivered Wade's ultimatum at the ranch. His presence confirmed the gravity of their situation. Wade was committing significant resources to recover Sarah's evidence. "How many?" Eli asked. 20, perhaps 30, Grey Wolf answered. "Too many even for our warriors." Eli made a swift decision. "Take me to Sarah. Now." Wildflower's lodge was already a flurry of activity when they arrived. The healer was gathering her medicines while two younger women helped a weak but conscious Sarah to sit up. "Eli," Sarah called when she saw him. "What's happening?" "Wade's men have found us," he said bluntly, knowing she deserved the truth. "They've surrounded the village." Sarah's face paled further, but her voice remained steady. "How?" "Someone betrayed us. It doesn't matter now." Eli knelt beside him. "Can you ride?" "If necessary," she clutched his arm. "The children, we'll get them out too." Wildflower interrupted. "There is a path known only to our healers leading north through the high caves. It emerges beyond the ridge where the white men wait." "Is it passable for horses?" Eli asked. "For sure-footed ones, yes. But you must leave now before full light." Eli turned to Grey Wolf. "Will you help us reach this path?" The warrior nodded. "I will guide you, and 4 of our best warriors will go with you for protection." Night Sky, who had followed Eli to the lodge, spoke. When you are safely away, we will treat with Hawkins. Offer him false trails to follow. He may attack anyway, Eli warned. We are prepared, Night Sky assured him. This would not be the first time we have faced white men's guns. The plan came together with remarkable speed. Within minutes, Grey Wolf had gathered 5 horses, the sturdiest in the village. Wildflower prepared medicines for Sarah, wrapping them carefully in hide pouches, with instructions for their use. The sweetest children, bleary-eyed and frightened, were brought to Eli by Blue Sky's wife, who embraced each one before reluctantly letting them go. As they prepared to depart through the northern edge of the village, the white medicine man Night Sky had mentioned was nowhere to be found. He has not returned from the North Valleys, Night Sky explained, but if you take the cave path, you may meet him on the trail beyond. Eli helped Sarah mount, concerned by her weakness, but impressed by her determination. The infection had receded slightly under Wildflower's care, but she remained dangerously ill. The journal, Sarah whispered, clutching her coat. It's still there, Eli assured her. We'll get it to the governor one way or another. Eric and one of the older children rode double with warriors, while Eli took the 2 youngest on his horse. As they prepared to depart, Night Sky approached one final time. Go, soldier, he said solemnly. The path ahead is hard, but your heart is strong again. Remember the man you became that day long ago. That is your true self. Eli nodded, unable to find words adequate for the chief's generosity in the face of danger. With Grey Wolf leading their small party, slipped away from the village just as the eastern sky began to lighten. They followed a narrow game trail that climbed steeply into the rocky heights above the valley, eventually disappearing into a narrow fissure in the mountainside, the entrance to the cave system Wildflower had described. The passage through the mountain was harrowing narrow in places, with unexpected drops and turns. The children clung silently to their protectors, too frightened even to cry. Sarah swayed in her saddle but remained upright through sheer force of will. They had traveled perhaps half a mile through the twisting passages when Grey Wolf suddenly raised his hand, signaling a halt. Ahead, a shaft of early morning light penetrated the cave from a side passage, a natural chimney to the surface. And there, silhouetted against that light, stood a figure Eli recognized instantly, despite the years, broad-shouldered and imposing even in middle age, with the unmistakable bearing of command. Sherman Wade. Beside him stood 2 tribal scouts, their faces impassive as they trained rifles on the approaching party. Captain Morgan, Wade called, his voice echoing in the confined space. It's been a long time. Grey Wolf and his warriors reached for weapons, but Eli signaled them to wait. The cave was too narrow for effective fighting, and Wade clearly had the advantage of position. Colonel, Eli acknowledged, using Wade's military rank rather than his current title. You're a long way from your railroad. Wade stepped forward, his features becoming visible in the dim light. The same commanding presence, Eli remembered now, tempered with age and marked by the scar that traced from temple to cheek. His beard had gray now, but his eyes remained the same, intense, calculating, absolutely certain of his own rightness. Not so far, actually, Wade replied with unsettling cordiality. My survey crews are marking the route just 10 miles south of here. He glanced past Eli to where Sarah sat her horse. Miss Carpenter, I presume. You've led us on quite a chase. Murder Colonel Wade? Sarah's voice was weak but defiant. Is that what you've become? Something flickered in Wade's expression, a momentary hesitation quickly masked. Politics creates unfortunate necessities, Miss Carpenter. Your father chose his path. As did you, she countered. Wade's attention returned to Eli. I'm disappointed, Morgan. After everything we went through together, everything I did for you, this is how you repay loyalty. Loyalty, Eli couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. Was murdering a United States senator loyalty to the country we fought for? Was slaughtering innocent settlers loyalty to the principles we claim to uphold? Progress demands sacrifice, Wade said, as if explaining a simple truth to a child. The railroad will connect this nation as never before. Cities will rise where there was wilderness. Industries will flourish. A few lives weighed against the future of America. He shrugged. History will vindicate me. History is written by men like Senator Carpenter, Eli replied. Men of conscience. Wade's expression hardened. Men of conscience build nothing. They merely criticize what better men create. He gestured to the tribal scouts beside him. Come now, Morgan. Surrender the journal and the woman. No one else need be harmed. Eli assessed their situation with the soldier's eye. Wade and his scouts had the high ground and clear shots. Behind Eli, the Swedish children huddled against their tribal protectors, terrified into silence. Sarah sat straight in her saddle despite her illness, one hand inside her coat where the journal was hidden. And in that moment, Eli recognized the terrible symmetry of their positions, he and Wade facing each other across a divide far greater than the physical space between them, each believing himself right, each willing to risk everything for his conviction. "I can't do that, Colonel," Eli said finally. "Can't or won't." Wade sighed, seeming genuinely regretful. "I saved your life at Gettysburg, Morgan. I took a Confederate bullet pulling you off that field." "I know." Eli met his former commander's gaze steadily. "And I've carried that debt for 11 years. But there are greater debts than the one I owe you." Something dangerous flashed in Wade's eyes, such as the debt we owe to the oath we took to protect this country and its people. All its people, not just the rich men back east who fund your railroad. For a long moment, Wade said nothing, studying Eli as if seeing him anew. Then he nodded slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, if not agreement. "I always knew you had conviction, Morgan. It's why I valued you during the war." His hand moved to rest on his holstered pistol. "It's also why I knew when I heard you were involved that this wouldn't end easily." Behind Wade's shadows moved more men, positioning themselves in the cave's branching passages. Eli realized with growing dread that they were trapped between Wade's forces ahead and potentially Hawkins's men behind, still surrounding the tribal village. "There's nowhere to go, Morgan," Wade said, reading his thoughts. "Surrender the journal, and I give you my word, the woman will receive medical care, the children will be placed with good families, and you," he paused, "you can return to your ranch. We'll call the debt paid in full." It was in its way a generous offer if one could trust the word of a man who had ordered a senator's assassination. Eli glanced back at Sarah, seeing the fear and determination in her fever-bright eyes. "Don't," she whispered loud enough for only him to hear. "Everything my father died for." A shot rang out from somewhere deeper in the cave system, followed by shouting. Wade's head snapped toward the sound, momentary confusion crossing his features. Eli seized the opportunity, spurring his horse forward while drawing his revolver in one fluid motion. "Ride," he shouted to Grey Wolf and the others. "Back to the village." Chaos erupted in the confined space. Wade's scouts fired their shots, echoing deafeningly. One of the tribal warriors cried out, clutching his shoulder. Horses reared in panic, their hooves striking sparks from the stone floor. Eli's charge forced Wade to dive aside, momentarily clearing the passage. Grey Wolf and the others surged forward, the children clinging desperately to their rescuers. Sarah somehow stayed mounted, bent low over her horse's neck. More shots followed them as they fled back the way they had come, bullets ricocheting from the cave walls. The youngest child riding with Eli sobbed against his chest. "Who's shooting?" Sarah gasped as they galloped through the twisting passages. "I don't know," Eli replied grimly, "but whoever it is just gave us our only chance." They emerged into daylight to find the tribal village under attack. Hawkins's men had grown impatient and launched their assault. Warriors fought desperately to defend their homes, while women and children fled toward the forest. Grey Wolf led them toward a narrow ravine that offered an escape route, but as they approached, riders appeared to block their path, Hawkins himself with 5 men, their rifles leveled. "End of the trail, Morgan," Hawkins called, a cruel smile splitting his scarred face. Trapped between Wade behind and Hawkins ahead, surrounded by fighting in a village that had offered them sanctuary, Eli made the only choice he could. He turned to Grey Wolf, lifting the smallest child from his saddle. "Take the children," he ordered. "Find a way through." Grey Wolf understood immediately. "And you? We'll create a diversion." Eli's eyes met Sarah's. She nodded, her face pale but resolute. As Grey Wolf and the other warriors took the children and split off toward a different escape route, Eli and Sarah rode directly toward Hawkins's position, a seemingly suicidal charge. Hawkins's men fired bullets whistling past. Eli returned fire with his revolver, striking one man who tumbled from his saddle. Sarah, summoning strength from some hidden reserve, drew a small derringer from her coat and fired as well. The unexpected counterattack created momentary confusion among Hawkins's men, enough for Eli and Sarah to veer suddenly toward a steep embankment. Their horses slid down the slope in a shower of loose rock and dirt, emerging onto a lower trail that led away from the village. Behind them, Hawkins shouted orders, organizing pursuit. Ahead lay unknown territory, but also their only hope of escape. As they rode hard along the narrow trail, Sarah suddenly swayed, then slipped sideways from her saddle. Eli barely managed to catch her before she fell, pulling her across his lap. "Hold on," he urged, feeling the heat of her fever through her clothing. "Just hold on." Her eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain and exhaustion. "Wade," she whispered. "He was waiting for us. How did he know?" It was the question that had been burning in Eli's mind since their confrontation in the cave. Wade had bypassed the village entirely, positioning himself precisely where they would emerge from the cave system. Someone had betrayed them. Someone who knew the secret path. "We'll figure that out later," Eli promised. "Right now, we need to find shelter. You need rest and medicine." Sarah's hand clutched weakly at his shirt. "The children. Grey Wolf will protect them." He hoped it was true. The tribal warrior had impressed him with his courage and resourcefulness. They followed the trail as it wound through increasingly rugged terrain, the sounds of pursuit gradually fading behind them. Either Hawkins had lost their trail or had chosen to focus on the tribal village instead. Neither option brought Eli comfort. By midday, Sarah's condition had deteriorated alarmingly. The exertion and trauma had worsened her fever, and she drifted in and out of consciousness. Eli knew he needed to find shelter and help soon or risk losing her entirely. The trail eventually led them to a small clearing beside a rushing stream. Eli was about to continue when he noticed something unexpected, a cabin half hidden among the pines. Smoke rose from its stone chimney, suggesting occupation. Caution warred with desperation as Eli approached. This deep in the wilderness, the cabin's occupant could be anyone: prospector, trapper, outlaw. But Sarah needed help immediately. He dismounted carefully, cradling Sarah against him, and approached the cabin door. Before he could knock, it swung open to reveal a bearded man in his 60s with keen eyes and the steady hands of a physician. "I've been expecting you," the man said calmly, as if the arrival of a wounded woman and an armed rider was an everyday occurrence. "Wildflower's messenger reached me yesterday. Bring her inside." Eli hesitated, suspicion overriding relief. "Who are you?" The man regarded him with patient understanding. "Jonathan Hayes, formerly of the 10th Massachusetts Infantry, currently physician to the tribal people, and anyone else who needs help in these mountains." He gestured to Sarah. "That wound won't wait for introductions, Captain Morgan." The use of his rank startled Eli. "You know me. I know of you, the ghost soldier who stood against his commander to save tribal women and children." Hayes held the door wider. "Now please bring her inside before that infection takes her beyond my help." With no better option, Eli carried Sarah into the cabin. The interior was surprisingly well appointed, a blend of frontier practicality and educated refinement. Medical texts lined rough-hewn shelves. Surgical instruments gleamed on a clean work table. Herbs hung drying from the rafters. Hayes directed Eli to place Sarah on a narrow bed, then immediately began examining her wound. "Gunshot, several days old infection, well established." He muttered, more to himself than to Eli. "Wildflower's poultice was a good start, but we'll need more aggressive treatment." As the doctor worked, Eli remained vigilant, his hand never straying far from his revolver. Despite Hayes' apparent legitimacy, trust came difficult after the betrayal that had led Wade to the cave. "You can relax, Captain," Hayes said without looking up from his work. "If I meant you harm, I'd have simply waited for Wade's men to find you. They've been combing these mountains for days." "How do you know so much about our situation?" Hayes paused, meeting Eli's gaze directly. "Because I was there when Sherman Wade gave the order to kill Senator Carpenter." The statement hung in the air between them, momentous and terrible. Eli's hand moved to his gun, but Hayes continued his treatment of Sarah unperturbed. "I didn't participate, if that's what you're wondering," the doctor continued. "I was in Denver acquiring medical supplies. Wade had convened a meeting of his investors, railroad men, bankers, politicians. I attend to his health when he's in Colorado, so my presence wasn't questioned. You're Wade's physician." Among other things, Hayes applied a pungent salve to Sarah's wound. "I've cultivated that relationship for years, Captain Morgan. It allows me to monitor his activities to warn the tribes when necessary." "You're a spy," Eli realized. Hayes smiled thinly. "I prefer concerned citizen. After the war, I saw what men like Wade were doing to this country, to the people who already lived here, to the land itself, all in the name of progress." Bitterness edged his voice. "I couldn't stop them with a gun, so I chose a different approach." "And Senator Carpenter, did you know what Wade planned for him?" I suspected Wade would move against him eventually. The senator was getting too close, gathering too much evidence. Hayes shook his head regretfully. I tried to warn him, but I was too late. Sarah stirred on the bed, her eyes open to focus on Hayes with confusion. Who? She began weakly. Dr. Hayes, Eli explained. He's treating your wound. Hayes offered her a reassuring smile. Rest, Miss Carpenter. The fever should break by morning with the medicines I've given you. Sarah's gaze moved between the two men, sensing the tension. Can we trust him? She asked Eli directly. Before Eli could answer, Hayes spoke. Your father and I corresponded, Miss Carpenter. He provided information about Wade's Eastern connections, while I shared what I learned of his Western operations. He produced a letter from a desk drawer, handing it to her. Your father's hand. You'll recognize it. Sarah examined the letter, recognition dawning in her eyes. It's authentic, she confirmed to Eli. This mentions the journal coding system only my father and I knew. Some of Eli's suspicion eased, though vigilance remained. If you opposed Wade all along, why didn't you expose him yourself? With what evidence? Hayes countered. My word against a war hero, a captain of industry, a man with senators and judges in his pocket. He shook his head. I needed proof that would stand in court. Senator Carpenter was gathering that proof. The journal? Sarah said, her hand moving protectively to her coat. Exactly. Hayes's expression grew grave. Which is why Wade will burn the world to find you. The cave route was compromised. Someone within the tribe has been bought. The village may already be destroyed. The thought of Night Sky's people suffering for their protection weighed heavily on Eli. The children we were traveling with, already safe, Hayes reassured him. They arrived an hour before you escorted by Grey Wolf. I've sent them on to my colleague in Silver Creek, a Quaker family, who will care for them until permanent arrangements can be made. Relief flooded through Eli at this news. At least the Swedish children had escaped the chaos they'd inadvertently brought to the tribal village. So what now? He asked. Wade knows we have the journal. He's committed to finding us. Now, Hayes said, rising from Sarah's bedside, we do what Senator Carpenter intended. We get that journal to Governor Rout. The trails to Denver are watched, Eli reminded him. Hayes smiled, a cunning expression that transformed his scholarly face. Not all of them. There are ways known only to those who need to remain unseen. He moved to a map spread on his table. But first, you both need rest. We leave at midnight, when Wade's men will be at their least effective. As Hayes prepared a meal, Eli stood by the cabin's single window, watching the gathering dusk. Somewhere out there, Wade and Hawkins continued their hunt. The tribal village might be burning. Grey Wolf and Wildflower might be dead or captured because they had helped strangers. And here they were, planning to slip away in darkness, carrying evidence that might bring justice, but couldn't undo the damage already done. Stop, Sarah's voice came softly from the bed. I can hear you blaming yourself from here. Eli turned to find her watching him, her eyes clearer than they had been in days, the medicine beginning to work. People are dying because they helped us, he said simply. People were already dying because of Wade, she countered. My father, those Swedish paddlers, how many tribal people? She struggled to sit up. This isn't about us anymore, Eli. It's about stopping a man who believes his vision of progress justifies any atrocity. Her use of his given name, spoken with such conviction despite her weakness, struck him powerfully. You sound like your father, he said. A sad smile touched her lips. The highest compliment you could give me. She held his gaze. We'll honor their sacrifices by finishing what my father started, by making Wade answer for his crimes. From across the cabin, Hayes watched their exchange with thoughtful eyes. You two should get some rest, he advised. The journey ahead will test even the strongest among us. As Eli finally allowed himself to sink into a chair beside Sarah's bed, the exhaustion of days catching up to him, Hayes added quietly, and Captain Morgan Wade was right about one thing. Progress does demand sacrifice. But he was wrong about whose sacrifice was required. The doctor's words followed Eli into uneasy sleep, where he dreamed of Gettysburg's bloody fields, blending with burning tribal lodges, of Wade's face shifting between commander and monster, of Sarah falling beyond his reach into darkness. And through it all, question that had no easy answer: what sacrifice would be demanded of them before this journey ended? Midnight arrived, shrouded in clouds, the moon, a mere suggestion behind layers of darkness. Jonathan Hayes moved with practiced efficiency, packing medical supplies and provisions, while Eli helped Sarah prepare for travel. The doctor's treatment had reduced her fever significantly, but she remained weak, her face drawn with exhaustion. "The trail I'm proposing is difficult," Hayes explained as he worked, "but it avoids the main passes where Wade's men will be watching. It follows old tribal hunting paths through the high country, then descends to Silver Creek from the north." "Silver Creek?" Eli questioned. "Why not straight to Denver?" Hayes secured his medical bag. "Because Wade will have the Denver road locked tight. Silver Creek has a telegraph office. We can wire Governor Root from there, arrange a military escort for the Journal." "Assuming Wade doesn't control the telegraph operator," Eli pointed out. "He doesn't," Hayes replied with certainty. "Martha Reynolds runs the office. Her husband was a Union colonel killed at Cold Harbor. She despises Wade and everything he represents." Sarah, who had been listening silently, spoke up. "My father mentioned a Martha Reynolds in his notes. She provided information about Wade's land acquisitions around Silver Creek." Hayes nodded. "Martha has been quietly documenting Wade's activities for years. Her position gives her access to telegraph communications and land transactions, and no one suspects a widow approaching 60 of espionage." Outside, a horse nickered softly, the signal from Hayes's tribal scout that the perimeter remained secure. The doctor had explained that a small group of loyal warriors, led by Grey Wolf, had established a protective cordon around the cabin while they prepared to depart. "What news of the village?" Eli asked, the fate of Night Sky's people weighing on his conscience. Hayes's expression darkened. "According to Grey Wolf, Wade's men and their tribal collaborators attacked in force. Many lodges were burned." He paused. "Night Sky and most of the tribe escaped into the high country, but there were casualties, including Wildflower. She was captured while helping others flee." The news struck Eli like a physical blow. Wildflower, who had saved Sarah's life, was now in Wade's hands because she had helped them. "We have to help her," he insisted. "The best help we can offer is completing our mission," Hayes countered gently. "Expose Wade, strip him of power, bring him to justice. That's how we honor Wildflower's sacrifice." Sarah touched Eli's arm. "He's right," she said softly. "We can't save her by charging into Wade's camp. We need to be strategic." Eli knew they were correct, but the knowledge did little to ease his sense of responsibility. One more debt he could never fully repay. They departed under cover of darkness, Hayes leading on a sturdy mountain pony, followed by Sarah on a gentle mare. Eli brought up the rear, constantly scanning for pursuit. Grey Wolf and 3 other warriors accompanied them for the first mile, then melted into the forest to create false trails that would confuse Wade's trackers. The path Hayes chose barely deserved the name, a narrow game trail that wound through dense pine forest, occasionally disappearing altogether. Only the doctor's intimate knowledge of the terrain kept them moving in the right direction. They traveled in silence, each lost in their own thoughts as the miles slowly accumulated. Dawn found them high in the mountains, the air thin and sharp with cold. Hayes called a brief halt to check Sarah's condition and rest the horses. Eli helped her dismount, concerned by her pallor and the trembling in her limbs. "I'm fine," she insisted, though the effort of speaking belied her claim. "You're the worst liar I've ever met, Senator's daughter," Eli replied, guiding her to a fallen log where she could rest. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "My father said the same, said I'd never make a politician." Hayes approached with his medical bag. "Let me check that wound." While the doctor examined Sarah, Eli moved to a nearby outcropping that offered a view of the valley below. In the distance, thin columns of smoke rose from the location of the tribal village, evidence of the destruction Wade had wrought. Closer, perhaps 5 miles back along their trail, dust clouds indicated riders moving at speed. "We've got company," Eli called to Hayes. "Moving fast." The doctor joined him, studying the dust clouds with narrowed eyes. "Hawkins," he concluded. "Wade's bloodhound. He never gives up a trail." "How far to Silver Creek?" 15 miles as the crow flies, more like 20 by the path we're taking." Hayes calculated mentally. "We can reach town by nightfall if we push hard." But he left the thought unfinished, both men glancing towards Sarah. Even with Hayes's treatment, she might not have the strength for such a journey. "I'll make it," Sarah stated firmly, having overheard their conversation. She struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. "Too many people have sacrificed too much for us to fail now." Her determination was inspiring, but Eli exchanged a concerned glance with Hayes. Will alone might not be enough to overcome physical limitations. We'll ride double, Eli decided. Sarah with me. It will slow us down but ensure she doesn't fall. They remounted quickly, Sarah positioned in front of Eli where he could support her. Hayes led them onto an even narrower trail that climbed steeply before traversing a precarious ridge. Below, the valley fell away for hundreds of feet, the forest reduced to a green carpet broken by silver threads of streams. By midday, they had crossed the ridge and begun their descent towards Silver Creek. The signs of pursuit had temporarily disappeared, suggesting Hawkins had lost their trail in the high country. But Eli maintained his vigilance, knowing their hunter's reputation for tenacity. "Tell me about Silver Creek," Sarah requested, as they rode partly to distract herself from pain and exhaustion. "What kind of town is it?" "Small but growing," Hayes replied over his shoulder. "Founded after the war by returning soldiers and Eastern investors. Wade has been buying property through proxies, positioning for when the railroad comes through. And the people, mostly decent folks, trying to build new lives. Some mine prospectors working the creek, a few ranchers." Hayes pointed ahead to where the land began to level out. "Down there you can see the first outlying farms." The valley spread before them, a patchwork of small homesteads nestled among pine forests. In the distance, perhaps 5 miles away, the town of Silver Creek itself was visible, a collection of wooden buildings clustered along what appeared to be a single main street. "Looks peaceful," Sarah observed. "On the surface," Hayes agreed, "but tensions run deep. Wade has divided the town between those who see the railroad as salvation and those who fear being swallowed by progress." They continued downward, the trail gradually widening into a proper road as it approached the settled areas. Eli remained alert, increasingly uneasy about their conspicuous position in the open valley. If Hawkins had scouts watching from the heights, his concern proved prescient when a distant rifle shot cracked across the valley. The bullet struck nowhere near them, a warning rather than a serious attempt. "They've spotted us," Eli announced grimly, urging his horse to greater speed. "Hayes is there, cover ahead." The doctor pointed to a grove of cottonwoods near a creek crossing. "There we can ford the stream and approach town through the Peterson farm." They galloped toward the trees, another shot kicking up dirt 30 yards behind them. Whoever fired was closing the range, becoming more accurate with each attempt. Reaching the cottonwood grove, they plunged into the shallow creek, horses splashing through cold water that ran off the mountains. On the far bank, Hayes led them through a cornfield, the tall stalks providing welcome concealment. A weathered farmhouse appeared ahead, smoke rising peacefully from its chimney. As they approached, a man emerged onto the porch, rifle in hand. "That's far enough," he called, his stance wary, but not overtly hostile. Hayes reined in, raising his hands to show peaceful intentions. "James Peterson, I'm Dr. Hayes. I treated your wife's pneumonia last winter." Recognition dawned on the farmer's face. "The tribal doctor," he acknowledged, lowering his rifle slightly. "What brings you here with such urgency?" "We need passage through your land to reach town," Hayes explained, "and perhaps your discretion about our presence." Peterson studied them, his gaze lingering on Sarah's exhausted form and Eli's vigilant posture. "Wade's men were here yesterday," he said finally, asking questions, making threats. "Said they were looking for fugitives." "And what did you tell them?" Eli asked. "To get off my land." Peterson spat to emphasize his disdain. "Wade's tried to force me out for 2 years, offered half what my farm's worth, then cut off my water rights when I refused." He gestured toward his fields. "Had to dig a new well deeper than most men go. But I'm still here." Hayes smiled. "And we've come to the right place. This is Elijah Morgan and Sarah Carpenter, Senator Carpenter's daughter." Peterson's eyes widened. "The senator who was killed, the one who was fighting against the railroad." Sarah nodded. "We have evidence of Wade's crimes. We need to reach the telegraph office in Silver Creek." The farmer seemed to reach a decision. "Come inside. My wife will tend to you while I check the road to town." The Peterson farmhouse was modest but meticulously maintained. Hannah Peterson, a sturdy woman with kind eyes, immediately took charge of Sarah, helping her to a comfortable chair and providing hot tea and fresh bread. "You poor child," she clucked, noting Sarah's exhaustion. "James, heat water for a proper bath. She needs cleaning up before that wound goes bad again." While the Petersons tended to Sarah, Hayes drew Eli aside. "We should separate," he suggested quietly. "Wade knows we travel together. I can create a diversion while you get Sarah in the journal to Martha Reynolds." Eli considered the proposal. What kind of diversion? The obvious kind. Hayes smiled grimly. I'll ride openly into town drawing attention. Wade's men will assume you and Sarah are with me or following close behind. It's too dangerous. I've evaded Wade for years, Hayes interrupted. I know Silver Creek and its surroundings better than Hawkins ever will. Their discussion was interrupted by James Peterson's return. The farmer's expression was grave as he removed his hat. Town's crawling with Wade's men, he reported. At least 20, maybe more. They're checking everyone coming or going. A blockade, Hayes murmured. Worse, Peterson continued. Sheriff Taylor's deputized some of them. They're claiming legal authority to search for the senator's murderers. Eli and Hayes exchanged alarmed glances. Wade's turned this into a manhunt, Eli realized, with us as the supposed criminals. Clever, Hayes acknowledged grudgingly. If we're accused of killing the senator, any evidence we present will be tainted. Sarah, who had been listening from across the room, spoke up. So we need not just to reach Martha Reynolds, but to publicly clear our names. Precisely. Hayes paced the small room, thinking rapidly. Peterson, who in town might still be trustworthy, people who haven't bought Wade's version of events. The farmer considered the question. Reverend Michaels runs the church. He's spoken against Wade's methods from the pulpit. Martha Reynolds, of course. Samuel Davis at the newspaper might print the truth if given proper evidence. Is there a back way into town? Eli asked. Something that avoids the main roads. The old mining tunnel, Hannah Peterson suggested. It runs from Harker's abandoned claim almost to the church basement. The children use it for play sometimes. James nodded. It's narrow in spots but passable. Comes out behind the church away from the main street where Wade's men are concentrated. A plan began forming in Eli's mind. If we could get Sarah and the journal to Reverend Michaels, he could help us reach Martha Reynolds. Meanwhile, Hayes creates his diversion. I'll do more than divert, Hayes declared. I'll confront Wade directly in public where he can't simply have me shot without consequences. That's suicide, Eli objected. Hayes shook his head. Not if timed correctly. Once you've secured the journal and sent the telegram, Wade's careful facade will crumble. The man has many sins, but his greatest weakness is pride. Provoked properly, he'll reveal his true nature. Their planning continued as afternoon waned toward evening. Peterson sketched a map showing the location of the mining tunnel entrance and its path beneath the town. Hannah prepared food and fresh bandages for their journey while insisting Sarah rest as much as possible before departing. As dusk approached, Eli stepped onto the farmhouse porch, scanning the darkening landscape. The lights of Silver Creek glimmered in the distance, deceptively peaceful. Somewhere in that town, Wade's men searched for them, prepared to kill to prevent the journal's contents from becoming public. Hayes joined him, offering a cup of coffee. Having second thoughts about the plan? No, Eli sipped the hot liquid. About other things, yes. Such as? Eli considered how to articulate the thoughts that had been troubling him. Wade saved my life at Gettysburg. For years that debt defined me. Now I'm working to destroy him. The Wade who saved you at Gettysburg might have been worthy of your loyalty, Hayes replied carefully. But men change, Captain Morgan. The question is whether your loyalty belongs to the man he was or the man he's become. And if they're the same man, if the seeds of today's monster were always there just waiting for the right conditions. Hayes was silent for a moment. Then perhaps the debt was never what you thought it was. He studied Eli's profile in the fading light. Or perhaps the debt remains, but the payment has changed. Maybe destroying what Wade has become is the only way to honor what he once was. The philosophical complexity of Hayes' suggestion resonated with Eli. Perhaps there was truth in it that opposing the corrupted Wade was in its way honoring the commander who had once embodied courage and purpose. Their contemplation was interrupted by the sound of approaching riders, multiple horses moving at speed along the road from town. Inside, Eli ordered, drawing his revolver. We've got company. They hurried into the farmhouse where Peterson was already dousing lamps. Get to the cellar, he directed, reaching for his rifle. Hannah, take them down. Sarah was helped to her feet, her strength somewhat restored by food and rest. What's happening? Riders coming, Eli explained tersely. Could be Wade's men. Hannah Peterson led them to a trap door concealed beneath a rug, revealing a small root cellar excavated beneath the house. Down quickly, she urged. James will handle this. They descended into darkness, Hayes producing a small pocket lantern once the trap door closed above them. The cellar was cramped but well-stocked with preserved foods and supplies, evidence of the Petersons' self-sufficient lifestyle. Above, they heard the thunder of hooves entering the farmyard, followed by loud voices. James Peterson's deeper tones responded, outwardly calm but carrying an edge of tension. "Evening, gentlemen," they heard him say. "What brings the sheriff out so late?" A new voice replied, official and self-important. "Searching for fugitives, Peterson. 3 of them, a woman, and 2 men wanted for questioning about Senator Carpenter's murder." Eli and Hayes exchanged glances in the dim lantern light. The sheriff himself had joined the hunt. "Haven't seen any strangers," Peterson responded evenly. "Mind if we look around?" the sheriff asked, though his tone suggested it wasn't really a question. "My land, my house," Peterson countered. "You got a warrant, Sheriff Taylor?" A tense silence followed, broken by a new voice, cold, precise, educated. Eli felt a chill of recognition even before the words became clear. "Mr. Peterson," Sherman Wade said smoothly, "your reluctance suggests you might be harboring criminals. That would make you an accessory to murder." "I know the law, Wade," Peterson replied, his voice hardening. "Better than you, apparently. No warrant, no search." "The law can be interpreted broadly in emergency situations," Wade continued, "and a murderer on the loose certainly qualifies." In the cellar, Eli moved instinctively toward the trap door, his hand on his gun. Hayes caught his arm, shaking his head in warning. Revealing themselves now would only endanger the Petersons further. "We know they came this way, Peterson," the sheriff insisted. "Tracks leading right to your property." "Lots of people use that road," Peterson replied. "I can't account for every rider." The conversation continued with Wade and the sheriff applying increasing pressure while Peterson stood his ground. Hannah, who had remained upstairs, eventually joined the discussion, her voice pitched perfectly between hospitality and indignation at the late intrusion. "Sheriff, if you're so determined to search our home, at least let me put on some coffee first," they heard her say. "It's the Christian thing to offer travelers refreshment." Her suggestion created a momentary pause in the confrontation. Then Wade spoke again, his tone now conciliatory. "Perhaps we've been too hasty," he said. "The Petersons are respected members of his community. If they say they haven't seen the fugitives, we should take them at their word." Eli frowned, suspicious of Wade's sudden retreat. The man he remembered never abandoned a position without good reason. "We'll continue our search elsewhere," Wade continued. "But Peterson, if you do encounter these people, remember, the woman may appear innocent, but she's dangerous. As for her companions, one is a doctor who's forsaken his oath to do no harm. The other, a former soldier with a history of violence." "I'll keep that in mind," Peterson replied neutrally. The sound of departing horses followed, but Eli remained tense, listening for any sign of deception, men left behind to watch the farm, perhaps. After several minutes of silence, the trapdoor opened, revealing James Peterson's weathered face. "They're gone," he reported, "but they'll be back." Wade wasn't convinced, Eli said as they emerged from the cellar, immediately moving to the windows to scan the surrounding darkness. "He gave up too easily," Hayes agreed. "He's planning something, which means we need to move quickly. Our window of opportunity is closing." Peterson nodded grimly. "I'll hitch the wagon. We'll hide you under hay bales and take you to Harker's mine. Less suspicious than riding that we deliver hay to the livery near there twice weekly." While Peterson prepared the wagon, Hannah helped Sarah change into sturdy clothing, more suitable for their journey through the mining tunnel. The senator's daughter had regained some color, but still moved with the careful deliberation of someone conserving limited strength. "Your wound is healing," Hannah observed as she secured a fresh bandage. "Dr. Hayes knows his business." "I owe him my life," Sarah acknowledged, "him and Captain Morgan both." Hannah smiled knowingly. "The captain seems quite devoted to your safety." A faint blush colored Sarah's pale cheeks. "He feels responsible. It's his nature." "Is that all it is?" Sarah didn't answer directly, but her eyes drifted to where Eli stood by the window, his profile sharp against the lamplight. "He's a good man who believes he isn't," she said finally. "He carries debts that aren't his to bear." "Men often do," Hannah replied with the wisdom of long marriage. "Sometimes they need to be shown the difference between a debt and a choice." Their conversation ended as Peterson announced the wagon was ready. Final preparations were made, swiftly. Weapons checked, provisions, secured routes confirmed one last time. Before departing, Eli pulled Hayes aside. If anything goes wrong, get Sarah in the journal to Martha Reynolds. That's the priority. Hayes studied him shrewdly. And where will you be if anything goes wrong? Wherever I need to be to make sure you succeed, Eli replied with quiet determination. The doctor clasped his shoulder. The man Wade speaks of the violent soldier who followed orders without question. I don't see him anymore. I see the ghost soldier who chose conscience over obedience. Remember that when the moment comes. They departed under full darkness, concealed beneath hay in the Petersons' wagon. The journey to the abandoned mine took nearly an hour, the wagon deliberately maintaining an unhurried pace to avoid suspicion. Twice they passed riders on the road, Wade's men patrolling, but the Petersons' legitimate business provided perfect cover. Harker's mine had been abandoned years earlier when its modest silver deposits played out. The entrance was partially concealed by overgrowth, the timber supports weathered but still sound. Peterson led them inside with a lantern pointing out the main shaft that ran toward town. Follow this for about half a mile, he instructed. There's a junction where 3 smaller tunnels branch off. Take the middle one. It leads to the church. The other 2 are dead ends or collapsed. How will we access the church from below? Hayes asked. There's a trap door in the storage room floor, Peterson explained. Originally used to bring in supplies during winter when the roads were impassable. Reverend Michaels knows about it. The children's Christmas pageant props are stored down there. They thanked the Petersons for their help, both farmers declining any payment for the considerable risk they'd taken. Senator Carpenter stood up for small farmers when Wade tried to run us off, James explained. This is our way of honoring his memory. As the Petersons departed with their wagon, Eli, Sarah, and Hayes prepared for the underground journey. Hayes's lantern provided modest illumination, revealing a narrow tunnel shored up with timbers at regular intervals. The air was cool and damp, carrying the mineral scent of earth long hidden from sunlight. Stay close, Eli advised, taking the lead with his revolver drawn, and watch your footing. These old mines can be treacherous. They proceeded carefully, the tunnel occasionally narrowing to the point where they had to turn sideways to continue. Water dripped from the ceiling in places, forming small puddles on the uneven floor. The only sounds were their footsteps, their breathing, and the distant scurrying of small creatures disturbed by their passage. After 20 minutes of steady progress, they reached the junction. Peterson had described a chamber where the main shaft split into 3 smaller tunnels. As promised, the central passage continued toward town, while the others veered off into darkness. So far, so good, Hayes murmured, checking Sarah's condition. How are you holding up? I've been better, she admitted, leaning against the tunnel wall for support. But I'll make it. Eli was about to suggest a brief rest when a sound echoed from the tunnel behind them, a dislodged stone perhaps, or a deliberate footstep. He immediately doused the lantern, plunging them into absolute darkness. Someone's following us, he whispered, straining to hear past the sudden thundering of his own pulse. They stood frozen in the darkness, barely breathing. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then unmistakably came the sound of cautious movement some distance back along the tunnel. They must have been watching the mine entrance, Hayes breathed. The side tunnels, Eli decided. Quick into the right passage. We'll double back once they've passed. Feeling their way in darkness, they moved into the rightmost tunnel, pressing themselves against the wall just beyond the junction. Eli positioned himself protectively in front of Sarah, knife drawn. A gunshot would reveal their exact location and potentially cause a cave-in. Minutes passed like hours as they waited. Finally, a faint glow appeared in the main tunnel as their pursuers approached the junction. Voices became audible, hushed but distinct. Tracks lead this way, a man said. Fresh ones. Spread out, another voice ordered. Johnson, take the right tunnel. Davis, the left. I'll continue straight. Eli tensed as footsteps approached their hiding place. 3 men, manageable odds under normal circumstances, but in the confined space of the mine with Sarah to protect. Wait, the leader called suddenly. Look at this. A pause followed. Eli could imagine the men examining the ground where their footprints would be visible in the damp earth. All 3 went straight, the leader concluded. The center tunnel, let's go. The glow of their lanterns receded as the pursuers continued down the middle passage. Eli waited until they were well away before allowing himself to breathe normally again. That was fortunate, Hayes whispered. Too fortunate, Eli replied suspiciously. They should have seen our tracks turning right. They relit their lantern, keeping the flame low, and examined the junction floor. The truth became immediately apparent. Someone had deliberately obscured their tracks and created false ones leading down the center tunnel. Someone's helping us, Sarah realized. Or setting a trap, Eli countered grimly. Either way, we can't take the middle passage now. It's being watched. Hayes studied the left tunnel. Peterson said these side passages were dead ends or collapsed. But what if he was wrong? The miners might have connected to older workings. It's a gamble, Eli acknowledged, but better than walking into an ambush. With few alternatives, they proceeded down the left tunnel, moving as silently as possible. This passage was narrower and less maintained than the main shaft, with occasional debris requiring careful navigation. After several hundred yards, it began to slope downward, the air growing noticeably damper. We're getting deeper, Hayes observed with concern, further from the surface, not closer to town. Before Eli could respond, the tunnel ahead abruptly widened into a natural cavern. Their lantern illuminated a breathtaking sight, crystal formations glittering from walls and ceiling, a small underground stream flowing across the smooth stone floor. It's beautiful, Sarah whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the open space. And unexpected, Eli added cautiously, scanning the cavern for other exits. Hayes moved toward the far wall, emitting what appeared to be man-made markings carved into the rock. These are survey notations, he reported, dated 1868. This cavern was known to the original miners. Does it lead anywhere? Eli asked practically. The doctor followed the markings along the wall. Here, another passage in the survey notation indicates it connects to the Silver Creek Bank basement. The bank, Sarah repeated in surprise. Why would a mine connect to a bank? Silver transport? Eli suggested. A secure way to move ore directly to where it could be weighed and valued without risk of highway robbery. Hayes nodded. That makes sense, and it's perfect for us. The bank is just 2 buildings away from the telegraph office. And the new passage was better maintained with proper timber supports and a relatively level floor. It climbed steadily, suggesting they were approaching the surface again. Their spirits rose with each step, the possibility of success finally seeming within reach. Then the tunnel ended abruptly at a solid brick wall. No, Hayes muttered in disbelief, running his hands over the obstruction. The survey clearly indicated a connection. They must have sealed it when the mine closed, Eli concluded, examining the brickwork. Security measure for the bank. Sarah leaned against the tunnel wall, exhaustion evident in her posture. So we're trapped between Wade's men behind us and this wall ahead. Eli refused to accept defeat. He ran his hands along the edge of the brickwork, searching for any weakness. No mortar on the sides, he noted. This wasn't a permanent seal, more like a removable barrier. Hayes joined his examination. You're right. See these iron fittings? This section was designed to be opened from the bank side, a hidden door disguised as a wall. Can we break through? Sarah asked. Eli tested the bricks, applying pressure at different points. It's solid, but not impenetrable. With the right leverage, he unsheathed his knife and worked it into a seam between bricks, gradually creating space to insert the barrel of his revolver as a makeshift pry bar. Hayes joined the effort with a piece of timber salvaged from the tunnel. Together, they slowly loosened one brick, then another. Someone will hear us, Sarah warned, keeping watch down the tunnel behind them. Can't be helped, Eli grunted, working the loosened bricks free. Unless you'd prefer waiting for Wade's men to find us. After nearly 20 minutes of careful work, they created an opening large enough for a person to crawl through. Beyond lay darkness and the musty smell of an enclosed space. I'll go first, Eli insisted, passing the lantern to Hayes. Cover the light until I signal. He squeezed through the opening, finding himself in a small storage room filled with wooden crates and metal boxes. A heavy door with multiple locks secured the entrance, but a narrow staircase led upward along one wall. All clear, he called softly. It's the bank vault antechamber. Hayes helped Sarah through the opening, then followed with the lantern. The three stood in the bank's basement, listening intently for any sound from above. The building was silent, presumably closed for the night. The staircase must lead to the main vault, Hayes whispered. Eli was already examining the door at the top of the stairs. More locks, he reported, but these operate from this side, meant to keep people out, not in. With painstaking care, he manipulated the locks, grateful for skills acquired during less honorable periods of his post-war life. Eventually, the mechanism yielded with a soft click. Easing the door open revealed the bank's main vault, an impressive chamber with steel walls and a massive circular door standing open ready to be sealed for the night. Beyond lay the bank's main floor visible through the vault entrance. "We made it," Sarah breathed, relief evident in her voice. "Not quite," Eli cautioned her. "We still need to reach the telegraph office without being seen." Hayes peered through the vault doorway. "The bank faces Main Street. Wade's men will be watching the front, but perhaps not the rear exit." They crept through the darkened bank, staying low to avoid being seen through the windows. The building was empty, the staff having departed hours earlier. At the rear door, Eli carefully checked the alley beyond before signaling the others to follow. The night air felt fresh after the confines of the tunnel. Silver Creek's main street lay just around the corner, lights burning in several establishments despite the late hour. The telegraph office stood 2 buildings away, its windows dark. "Now what?" Sarah whispered. "Martha Reynolds won't be at the office this late." "She lives above it," Hayes explained. "There's a private entrance in the alley." As they prepared to move toward the telegraph office, a patrol of Wade's men appeared at the far end of the alley. Eli pulled the others into a recessed doorway, holding his breath as the men passed within yards of their hiding place. "They're everywhere," Sarah observed once the patrol had gone. "How do we reach Martha without being seen?" Eli considered their options, none of them good. A direct approach would almost certainly be observed. Waiting until morning would only increase the risk of discovery. Then inspiration struck. "The rooftops," he suggested. "The buildings along this stretch share connecting walls. If we can get up there," Hayes nodded in understanding. "The bank has a fire ladder at the back. Not ideal, but possible." With no better alternative, they returned to the bank's rear wall, where an iron ladder led to the flat roof. Sarah, despite her weakened condition, insisted on climbing unassisted. "I've come too far to be carried now," she declared with quiet determination. Atop the bank roof, they found exactly what Eli had hoped for: a landscape of connected buildings with minimal height differences between them. Moving carefully to avoid loose gravel that might alert those below, they made their way across 2 rooftops until they reached the telegraph office. Hayes led them to a small rooftop door, a maintenance access that opened into the building's upper floor. "Martha's private quarters," he explained softly. "Let's hope she doesn't shoot intruders on sight." The door was locked but yielded to Hayes's gentle knocking. It opened a crack, revealing a wary female eye, then wider as recognition dawned. "Jonathan," a voice whispered in disbelief. "How on earth—" "We need to come inside Martha," Hayes interrupted urgently. "Quickly." The door opened fully, revealing a tall, silver-haired woman in her late 50s, dressed in a nightgown, with a shawl hastily wrapped around her shoulders. She ushered them into a small but comfortable apartment, immediately closing and locking the door behind them. "I've been worried sick," she scolded Hayes in a hushed voice. "Wade's men are everywhere asking questions, making threats. They say you're involved in Senator Carpenter's murder." "Lies, Martha," Hayes assured her. "This is Elijah Morgan and Sarah Carpenter, the senator's daughter." Martha Reynolds' eyes widened as she turned to Sarah. "My dear child," she breathed. "When I heard about your father, I couldn't believe Wade would go so far." "We have proof of his involvement," Sarah replied, producing the journal from inside her coat. "Everything my father discovered about Wade's operations. But we need to get it to Governor Rout immediately." Martha's expression hardened with resolve. "The telegraph office is being watched. Wade has men stationed outside day and night." "Can you get a message through?" Eli asked. "I can try." Martha considered the problem. "The equipment is downstairs. If I go down to send a routine message, as I sometimes do late at night, it might not arouse suspicion." "It's too dangerous," Hayes protested. "I've lived in this town for 15 years, Martha interrupted firmly. "People see an old widow, nothing more. Besides, I owe it to William Carpenter. He was one of the few who treated me as a professional, not just a woman filling her dead husband's shoes." While Martha prepared for her dangerous mission, she directed them to her small kitchen, where food and coffee awaited. Sarah sank gratefully into a chair, the long journey having depleted her reserves of strength. "We made it," she said softly to Eli, "against all odds." "Not quite yet," he cautioned. "We still need that telegram to reach the governor, and then for him to act on it." Sarah studied his face in the lamplight. "You don't believe we'll succeed?" "I believe Wade has spent years building his empire. He won't let it collapse without a fight." Eli's expression darkened. "And the most dangerous animal is one that's cornered." Hayes, who had been listening, nodded in agreement. Wade will sense the noose tightening. He'll take desperate measures. Such as, Sarah asked. Before either man could answer, Martha returned now, dressed for public appearance despite the late hour. I'll go down to send the message, she announced. If anyone questions me, I'll say I received an urgent request from a client in Denver. We should go with you, Eli insisted. Martha shook her head firmly. That would only attract attention. Stay here, keep the lights low, and be ready to move if necessary. She patted the small derringer concealed in her sleeve. I'm not defenseless, gentlemen. With remarkable composure for a woman about to risk her life, Martha Reynolds departed through a door that connected her living quarters to the telegraph office below. Long minutes passed in tense silence. Eli stationed himself at the window overlooking the street, watching Wade's men patrol. Hayes prepared his medical bag, anticipating potential need. Sarah studied her father's journal, ensuring she could explain its coding system to the authorities when the time came. Then the stillness shattered a shout from the street below. Running footsteps, the crack of a gunshot. Eli was at the connecting door instantly, gun drawn. Stay here, he ordered Sarah and Hayes, then slipped downstairs toward whatever chaos had erupted. The telegraph office was dark except for a single lamp illuminating the operator's desk. Martha stood beside the telegraph key, her derringer aimed at the front door, where shadows moved beyond frosted glass. They saw me sending, she explained tersely. Shot came through the window. Did the message go through, Eli asked, positioning himself behind the counter for cover. Most of it enough for Rout to understand, I think. Her hands were steady despite the danger. They'll break in any moment. As if confirming her prediction, a heavy impact shook the front door. Wood splintered around the lock. Upstairs, Eli directed. Barricade yourselves in. I'll hold them here. Don't be a fool, Martha snapped with surprising authority. There are at least 6 of them. We need to run, not fight. Another crash against the door emphasized her point. The wood began to give way. Eli made a swift decision. Is there a back exit? Martha nodded. Through the storeroom. It leads to the same alley you came from. Go now. Get Sarah and Hayes out through the roof access. I'll delay them here, then follow. The telegraph operator hesitated only briefly before acknowledging the logic of his plan. As she hurried upstairs, Eli overturned a heavy desk, creating a barricade facing the weakening door. He positioned himself behind it, revolver-ready Winchester rifle at his side. The door finally gave way with a crash of splintering wood. Lamplight revealed the first of Wade's men charging through the opening and directly into Eli's carefully aimed fire. The man fell backward with a cry, colliding with those behind him. Confusion erupted among the attackers. Eli used the opportunity to fire several more shots, not aiming to kill, but to create chaos and delay. Bullets answered his thudding into the wooden barricade or whining off the walls around him. When he judged enough time had passed, Eli retreated toward the storeroom, firing the Winchester to cover his movement. The rifle's larger caliber punched through walls, forcing the attackers to seek cover and buying precious seconds. The storeroom door locked from inside a small advantage. Eli secured it, then raced up the narrow stairs he found leading to the building's upper level. Behind him, the door began to splinter under renewed assault. He emerged into Martha's apartment to find it empty. The others had already escaped to the roof. Following their path, he reached the rooftop door just as the storeroom below was breached. Outside, the night air carried the sounds of growing commotion. Shouts echoed from multiple directions as Wade's men coordinated their search. Across the adjacent rooftops, Eli caught glimpses of movement, Hayes guiding Sarah and Martha toward the far side of the block. He was about to follow when a bullet struck the door frame inches from his head. Turning, he found John Hawkins standing in the rooftop doorway, a smoking revolver in his hand. End of the line, Morgan, Hawkins called, a cruel smile spreading across his scarred face. Nowhere left to run. Eli dove for cover behind a chimney stack as more bullets followed. The rooftop offered little protection, a flat expanse with only occasional ventilation pipes and chimney stacks breaking its surface. Wade wants you alive, Hawkins continued, advancing cautiously. Says you and he have unfinished business, but he didn't specify what condition you needed to be in. Pinned down and separated from the others, Eli faced a grim choice: surrender and hope to rejoin Sarah and Hayes later, or fight against worsening odds. As Hawkins closed in confident in his advantage, Eli made his decision. He would neither surrender nor die on this rooftop. There was a third option, one that would draw attention away from the others and perhaps create an opportunity for Sarah's evidence to reach its destination. With sudden determination, Eli broke from cover and raced toward the edge of the roof facing Main Street. Hawkins fired the bullet, grazing Eli's arm, but failing to stop his momentum. Reaching the edge, Eli holstered his revolver and leapt across the narrow gap to the adjacent building. Landing hard, he rolled to absorb the impact, then continued running. Behind him, Hawkins shouted in frustration, forced to take the same jump or lose his quarry. Building to building, Eli made his way along Silver Creek's Main Street, deliberately creating a spectacle. Townspeople emerging from saloons and hotels pointed upward in astonishment at the chase unfolding above their heads. Wade's men converged on the scene, attention diverted from wherever Sarah Hayes and Martha had fled. His diversion was working, but Eli knew it couldn't last. Already men were climbing to intercept him. Hawkins followed relentlessly behind. His options dwindled with each passing moment. Then ahead, he spotted a familiar figure on horseback. In the street below, Sherman, Wade himself, directing his men with cold efficiency. Their eyes met across the distance, recognition flashing between former commander and subordinate. In that moment, Eli knew what he had to do. If Wade captured him, the search for Sarah might ease long enough for her to escape with the journal. It was a sacrifice worth making. With this resolution firm in his mind, Eli vaulted down to a lower roof, then to an awning, making his way street level in a controlled descent. Landing in an alley, he drew his revolver and stepped into the main street directly into Wade's path. "It's over, Wade," he called, his voice carrying in the sudden hush that fell over the scene. "The governor knows everything. It's just a matter of time now." Wade's expression revealed nothing as he dismounted, facing the man who had once been his most trusted captain across 30 feet of dusty street. "I saved your life once, Morgan," he said, voice pitched for Eli's ears alone. "A debt that can never be repaid. Yet here you stand against me." "Here I stand," Eli agreed, keeping his revolver lowered but ready. Around them, Wade's men formed a loose circle, weapons trained on Eli from all directions. "Where is she?" Wade demanded. "Where is the carpenter woman and the journal?" Eli smiled thinly. "Beyond your reach." Fury flashed briefly across Wade's controlled features. "Wanting I beyond my reach. Not in this territory." "Times change, Colonel," Eli replied deliberately, using Wade's military rank. "The war ended 11 years ago. The rules have changed." "Have they?" Wade stepped closer, his hand resting casually on his holstered pistol. "The strong still prevail, the weak still perish. The only difference is the battlefield." As they faced each other in the dusty street, surrounded by armed men and curious townspeople, Eli realized this confrontation had been inevitable from the moment Sarah Carpenter appeared at his ranch. All paths had led here to this final reckoning between two men forged in the same crucible of war, but who had emerged with fundamentally different visions of peace. "Surrender now." Wade offered, his tone almost gentle. "Tell me where she's gone, and I'll show mercy, for old time's sake." Eli raised his revolver slowly, not pointing it at Wade, but holding it ready. "There was a time I would have followed you anywhere," he said, his voice carrying to the gathered crowd. "But that time ended when you forgot what we fought for." Wade's expression hardened. "What I fought for was a nation strong enough to never be threatened again. I'm building that nation, Morgan. Mile by mile of track, acre by acre of development. At any cost," Eli challenged. "Even murder, even destroying the very people this land belongs to. Progress demands sacrifice." Wade replied, the words practiced believable, the justification he had offered himself 1,000 times. "Not this kind of sacrifice," Eli countered. "Not innocent lives, not justice itself." Something shifted in Wade's eyes, a flicker of doubt perhaps, or simply a calculation that this public debate harmed his carefully constructed image. His hand moved suddenly, drawing his pistol with the speed that had made him legendary during the war. Eli matched the movement, both men aiming at each other across the short distance. Neither fired. Around them, Wade's men tensed, awaiting orders. "It doesn't have to end this way," Wade said quietly. "You're right," Eli agreed. "Surrender yourself to the law. Face justice for what you've done." A bitter laugh escaped Wade. "Justice? There is no justice in this world, Morgan. Only power and those willing to wield it." Before Eli could respond, commotion erupted at the far end of the street. Riders approached at speed, a dozen men in military uniforms, led by a figure Eli recognized instantly, despite the years, Captain James Reynolds of the Colorado Militia, Martha Reynolds' son. Behind them came more riders, tribal warriors with Grey Wolf and Night Sky among them. And in their midst, Dr. Hayes, Martha Reynolds, and Sarah Carpenter, upright and proud despite her exhaustion. Wade's men shifted uneasily, outnumbered and outflanked by this unexpected development. Wade himself remained impassive, though Eli detected the subtle tightening of his jaw, the only sign of his recognition that the situation had changed dramatically. Sherman Wade, Captain Reynolds called as his men formed a perimeter. By order of Governor Rout, you are under arrest for the murder of Senator William Carpenter and conspiracy against the United States government. The street fell silent as this pronouncement registered. Wade's hand remained steady on his pistol, still aimed at Eli's heart. An interesting claim, Wade replied coolly. Based on what evidence? Sarah urged her horse forward, the journal held high. My father's evidence, Mr. Wade. Every transaction, every bribe, every murder, all documented and verified. The governor has already received the initial telegraph. The full journal will be in his hands by morning. Hawkins, who had finally descended to street level, moved to Wade's side. Give the word, Colonel, he muttered. We can still fight our way out. For a moment, the outcome hung in balance. Wade's finger tensed on the trigger of his pistol, his eyes locked with Eli's. A single shot could ignite a bloodbath in Silver Creek's main street. It's over, Sherman, Eli said quietly, using Wade's given name for the first time. Let it end here. Something in Wade's expression changed, a softening, perhaps, or simply resignation. His pistol lowered slightly. Then, without warning, Hawkins raised his own weapon toward Sarah. If the journal's the problem, let's solve it permanently. Eli fired without hesitation. Hawkins staggered backward, shock registering on his face as he collapsed into the dust. In the same instant, Wade's pistol discharged, but his aim had shifted at the last moment, the bullet striking the ground at Eli's feet. Chaos threatened to erupt as militia and Wade's men trained weapons on each other. Captain Reynolds shouted for order, while tribal warriors knocked arrows ready for battle. Wade alone seemed calm amid the tension, his pistol now hanging loose at his side. He looked at Hawkins' body with an unreadable expression, then back to Eli. You chose your side, Morgan, he said finally. So be it. With deliberate movements, Wade holstered his weapon and raised his hands in surrender. His men following his example lowered their weapons. As Captain Reynolds moved to take Wade into custody, the former colonel paused beside Eli. This isn't the end, he said softly. Men like me built this nation. Men like me will always rise again. Perhaps, Eli acknowledged, but men like Sarah's father will always stand against you. And next time I'll be standing with them from the start. Wade's eyes revealed a flash of genuine regret. You were the best of my officers, Morgan. We could have accomplished great things together. We did accomplish great things, Eli corrected him. We saved the Union. What you've done since, that's not greatness. That's just greed wearing patriotism's clothes. No further words passed between them as Wade was led away, his empire built on corruption and enforced by violence beginning to crumble with his arrest. But Eli harbored no illusions about the challenges ahead. Powerful men had powerful friends, and the battle for justice was far from over. Sarah dismounted with Hayes's assistance, approaching Eli with newfound strength in her bearing despite her physical weakness. You did it, she said simply. You kept your promise to my father. We did it, Eli corrected her. All of us. His gaze moved to the gathered allies, Hayes, Martha Reynolds, Grey Wolf, and Night Sky, the militia that had arrived just in time. The dawn was breaking over Silver Creek, painting the eastern sky with shades of gold and crimson. A new day was beginning, one in which Sherman Wade would face justice, the tribes might retain their lands, and the corrupt empire built on suffering might finally face a reckoning. But as Eli watched Wade being led away, flanked by militia, he felt no triumph, only the weight of all that had been lost to reach this moment, and the knowledge that the hardest battles still lay ahead. 2 weeks after Sherman Wade's arrest, Silver Creek had transformed. The town bustled with activity as journalists from Denver and beyond descended to document the sensational case against the railroad magnate. Governor Root had dispatched additional militia to maintain order, their blue uniforms now a common sight along the previously sleepy Main Street. The Silver Creek Chronicle, under Samuel Davis's bold editorship, had published a special edition detailing Wade's crimes as documented in Senator Carpenter's journal. Copies had sold out within hours, reprinted and distributed throughout Colorado Territory and beyond. The story had even reached Eastern newspapers, with the New York Tribune running a front-page expose on the railroad baron's reign of terror. In Martha Reynolds's modest home above the telegraph office, Eli Morgan sat beside an open window, watching the activity below. The wound on his arm from Hawkins' bullet had healed quickly, leaving yet another scar to join those acquired at Gettysburg and during the turbulent years that followed. More telegrams from the governor, Martha announced, entering with a sheaf of papers. Wade's preliminary hearing has been scheduled for next week in Denver. Governor Root wants Sarah to testify. Eli nodded, unsurprised. Sarah's testimony, supported by her father's meticulously documented journal, formed the cornerstone of the case against Wade. "How is she today?" "Well, stronger," Martha replied, with the satisfaction of a woman who had nursed many back to health. "Dr. Hayes says the infection is completely cleared. She's resting now, but asked to see you when you returned." Since the confrontation in Silver Creek's Main Street, Sarah had been recovering in Martha's spare bedroom, regaining her strength while assisting authorities in deciphering her father's coded journal. Eli had spent much of his time with Captain Reynolds and the militia, helping to dismantle Wade's operation piece by corrupt piece. "There's something else," Martha added, her expression more reserved. "A message came from Denver. Wade's lawyers are already working to secure his release on bail. They are claiming the evidence was obtained illegally and that Wade is being persecuted for his vision of progress." Eli's jaw tightened. "Of course they are. Men like Wade don't surrender easily." "The governor remains confident," Martha assured him, "but he warns the fight will be difficult. Wade's connections reach into the highest levels of government and business." This too was expected. Sherman Wade hadn't built his empire without powerful allies who wouldn't abandon him at the first sign of trouble, especially when their own interests were entangled with his. "I should check on Sarah," Eli said, rising from his chair. The last 2 weeks had established a routine between them. His steady presence during her recovery, their quiet conversations about her father, the journal, and occasionally tentatively the future. He found her sitting up in bed, a book open in her lap, and sunlight streaming through the window to illuminate her golden hair. The sickly pallor had faded from her face, replaced by healthy color. She looked up as he entered, her smile transforming her features from merely pretty to radiant. "You're back," she observed. "How was your meeting with Chief Night Sky?" Eli took the chair beside her bed. "Productive. The governor has agreed to honor the original treaty boundaries as outlined in your father's documents." Night Sky is cautiously optimistic. "And Wildflower, any news?" Eli nodded, relief evident in his expression. "Found and rescued. Wade's men had been holding her at one of their camps, but when news of his arrest spread, many of his followers deserted. Grey Wolf led a party to bring her home." "Thank God," Sarah breathed. Wildflower's fate had weighed heavily on both of them, another potential casualty of their desperate journey. "There's more," Eli continued. "The Swedish children have been placed with a Lutheran minister and his wife in Denver. They'll have a proper homeschooling, a chance at a normal life." Sarah reached in for his hand, her fingers warm against his. "You've been busy, Captain Morgan." "Eli," he corrected gently. "Eli." She echoed, her gaze holding his. Something unspoken passed between them, a current as tangible as the sunlight warming the room. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Dr. Hayes entered, medical bag in hand, his scholarly features arranged in professional assessment. "I hear my patient is making excellent progress," he remarked, setting his bag on the bedside table. "Let's see if Martha's optimism is medically justified." While Hayes examined Sarah's healing wound, Eli moved to the window, giving them privacy. The street below continued its unusual bustle, a community awakening to the possibility of change after years under Wade's shadow. "The shoulder has healed remarkably well," Hayes announced after completing his examination. "I'd recommend another week of limited activity, but after that you should be able to travel to Denver for the hearing without medical concern." "Thank you, doctor," Sarah replied. "For everything. I wouldn't have survived without your care." Hayes waved away her gratitude. "I merely provided the medicine. Your own strength and Captain Morgan's determination did the rest." He repacked his bag, then addressed Eli. "A word before you go, Captain." Eli followed Hayes from the room, sensing the doctor had matters to discuss beyond Sarah's recovery. In the small hallway outside, Hayes's expression turned grave. "I've received worrying information from my contacts in Denver," he said quietly. "Wade's organization wasn't limited to Colorado. He has allies in Washington, investors with significant political influence." "We knew this." Eli responded, though unease settled in his stomach. Yes, but I've learned they're moving aggressively to protect their interests. Witnesses are being pressured. Evidence is disappearing from official custody. Hayes lowered his voice further. And there have been threats against Miss Carpenter's life. Eli's hand moved instinctively to his revolver. How credible? Credible enough that Governor Root has assigned a personal security detail for her journey to Denver. Hayes studied Eli's reaction. These are powerful men, Captain. They won't allow their ambitions to be derailed by one senator's daughter and her father's journal. What are you suggesting? That even after Wade faces justice, if he faces justice, the danger won't end. Miss Carpenter may never be truly safe while she remains determined to continue her father's work. The implication was clear. Sarah's crusade against corruption might be a life sentence of looking over her shoulder, waiting for vengeance from those whose interests she threatened. She won't abandon her father's cause, Eli said with certainty. It's not in her nature. Hayes nodded unsurprised. Then she'll need protection, someone who understands the danger she faces, someone committed to the same principles. His gaze was pointed. Someone like you, perhaps. Before Eli could respond to this suggestion, Martha called from downstairs. Captain Morgan, you have visitors? Descending to the telegraph office's front room, Eli found James and Hannah Peterson waiting. Their weathered faces broke into smiles at his appearance. Mr. Morgan, James greeted him, extending a calloused hand. We came to town for supplies and thought we'd check on Miss Carpenter's recovery. She's doing well, Eli assured them. Thanks in no small part to your help. Hannah beamed. We brought some fresh bread and preserves. Healing bodies need proper nourishment, not just medicine. As Martha took the gifts to the kitchen, James drew Eli aside. There's news you should know, he said in a lowered voice. Wade's men, the ones who haven't been arrested or fled, they're regrouping. Reed is leading them now. Samuel Reed, once Wade's sergeant, now apparently his successor. The name triggered memories of the pursuit through the mountains, the burning Swedish settlement. How do you know this? Eli asked. Travelers passing through, James explained. They've established a camp near Bear Creek, about 15 miles west. Word is they're planning something before Wade's hearing. They're calling it Justice for the Colonel. This development added urgency to Hayes' warning. If Wade's remaining loyalists were organizing the threat to Sarah and to anyone associated with Wade's downfall, was immediate and concrete. Thank you for the warning, Eli said, clasping the farmer's shoulder. I'll alert Captain Reynolds. After the Petersons departed, Eli sent word to the militia headquarters established in the former sheriff's office. Taylor, the corrupt sheriff who had aided Wade, now occupied a cell in the town jail, awaiting his own reckoning with justice. By evening, Captain Reynolds had organized additional patrols around Silver Creek and dispatched scouts to monitor their reported camp at Bear Creek. The young officer, bearing his father's military bearing and his mother's steely determination, had proven himself a capable ally in the aftermath of Wade's arrest. We can't move against them without evidence of criminal activity, Reynolds explained as they reviewed a map of the surrounding territory. But we can ensure they understand we're watching. They'll wait for a vulnerability, Eli cautioned, a moment when our guard is down. Then we don't let our guard down, Reynolds rolled up the map decisively. Especially not with Miss Carpenter's departure for Denver approaching. That will be their most likely opportunity. As twilight deepened into night, Eli returned to Sarah's room to share the developments. He found her sitting in a chair by the window, dressed in a simple blue dress Martha had helped procure. The transformation from wounded fugitive to composed lady was striking, yet the determination in her eyes remained unchanged. You look troubled, she observed as he entered. Reed is gathering Wade's remaining men, Eli explained, seeing no point in shielding her from the truth. They may attempt something before the hearing. Sarah received this news with remarkable composure. I'm not surprised. Wade inspires loyalty, even fanaticism in his followers. We've seen the evidence. Captain Reynolds is taking precautions, but the journey to Denver will be dangerous. All worthwhile journeys are, she replied with a hint of her father's philosophical bent. We knew this wouldn't end neatly with Wade's arrest. Eli studied her face in the lamplight, the strength evident beneath her gentle exterior, the intelligence that had allowed her to carry on her father's fight against overwhelming odds. In the weeks since finding her wounded in his storage shed, his admiration had deepened into something more profound, though largely unspoken between them. When this is over, he said carefully, what will you do? Sarah's gaze turned distant. continue my father's work in whatever capacity I can. Governor Root has offered me a position as special advisor on territorial development. It would allow me to monitor land transactions, ensure the treaties with the tribes are honored. A worthy cause, Eli acknowledged. And you, she asked, turning the question back to him, will you return to your ranch back to isolation? The question struck at the heart of the transformation these weeks had wrought in him. The solitary existence he had built, the carefully constructed walls between himself and the world, all had been irrevocably altered by Sarah Carpenter's arrival and the events that followed. I'm not sure that's possible anymore, he admitted. The world has a way of finding you even in the most remote corners. A smile touched her lips. Yes, it does, especially when that world needs you. Before he could respond, sounds of commotion reached them from the street below, raised voices, running footsteps. Eli moved swiftly to the window hand on his revolver in a time to see militiamen running toward the eastern edge of town. Stay here, he ordered Sarah, already heading for the door. Outside, Silver Creek had erupted into chaos. Residents emerged from homes and businesses, pointing toward an orange glow on the horizon. Fire, Eli intercepted a militia private rushing past. What's happened? Peterson Farm, the young soldier gasped. Burning. Captain Reynolds is gathering men to ride out. A cold dread settled in Eli's stomach. James and Hannah Peterson, their kindness repaid with fire and destruction, almost certainly by Reed's men, in retaliation for helping Sarah and exposing Wade. He ran to the militia headquarters, finding Reynolds organizing a response. I'm coming with you, Eli announced, leaving no room for argument. Reynolds nodded grimly. Thought you might. Horses are being readied. Within minutes, Eli rode with a dozen militiamen toward the growing conflagration. The night air carried the acrid scent of burning wood and the distant sounds of chaos. His mind filled with memories of the Swedish settlement, innocent lives destroyed for standing against Wade's ambitions. History repeating itself despite everything they had accomplished. As they crested the final rise before the Peterson farm, the full devastation became visible. The farmhouse was fully engulfed, flames reaching skyward, as if in accusation. The barn and outbuildings similarly burned, lighting the night in a hellish glow. And there in the farmyard, dark figures moved among the destruction. Reed's men, perhaps a dozen, watching their handiwork with apparent satisfaction. Form a line, Reynolds commanded as they approached. Prepare to engage. The militia fanned out along the ridge, rifles leveled. At their approach, the figures below scattered, mounting horses and firing wildly as they retreated. After them, Reynolds ordered. But Eli grabbed his arm. The Petersons, he reminded the young officer. We need to find them first. Dividing their forces, Reynolds led the pursuit while Eli and 3 militiamen approached the burning farmhouse. The heat was intense, making close approach impossible. Eli circled desperately, calling the Petersons' names, searching for any sign they had escaped. A weak voice answered from the direction of the well. James Peterson, bloodied but alive, cradling his unconscious wife in his arms. They had hidden in the root cellar when Reed's men arrived, emerging only when smoke began filling their refuge. They came without warning, James rasped as the militiamen helped carry Hannah to safety. Said this was a message that anyone who helped the traitors would face the same. Eli's fury burned colder than the flames consuming the Peterson home. This was no random violence but calculated terrorism, Reed sending a message not just to the Petersons, but to anyone who might stand against Wade's interests. You'll be safe now, Eli assured the injured farmer, though the words felt hollow against the backdrop of destruction. We'll get you to Dr. Hayes. As they transported the Petersons to town, Reynolds and his men returned from their pursuit, having captured 2 of Reed's followers. The prisoners, defiant despite their situation, confirmed what Eli had already surmised. This was only the beginning. Reed says the colonel will be free soon, one sneered, and then there will be a reckoning like you've never seen. Dawn found Silver Creek in a state of heightened tension. The attack on the Peterson farm had shattered any illusion of security following Wade's arrest. Reynolds stationed guards throughout the town, while Martha Reynolds' telegraph clicked constantly with updates to and from Denver. In the telegraph office, a council of sorts had assembled: Eli, Hayes, Reynolds, Martha, and Sarah, who had insisted on participating despite her recent recovery. The Swedish children's safety in Denver had been confirmed a small relief amid growing concerns. Reed has perhaps 20 men, Reynolds reported. Based on what we've observed in prisoner accounts, well-armed, fanatically loyal to Wade, and determined to prevent his case from reaching trial. Either by eliminating witnesses Hayes added his glance towards Sarah significant, or by freeing him during transport to Denver. We need to get Miss Carpenter to the governor immediately, Martha insisted, before they can organize another attack. Sarah, who had been listening intently, spoke with quiet authority. Running scared is exactly what they want. It shows their tactics work. She straightened in her chair. My father didn't back down when threatened, neither will I. This isn't about courage, Miss Carpenter, Reynolds countered respectfully. It's about strategy. We need to get you and the journal to Denver safely. The testimony you provide could ensure Wade remains imprisoned for life. Eli, who had remained silent during the exchange, finally spoke. Captain Reynolds is right about getting you to Denver, but Sarah's right too. We can't simply react to Reed's threats. His expression hardened with resolve. It's time we take the fight to them. What are you suggesting? Hayes asked, though his tone suggested he already anticipated Eli's answer. Reed expects us to hunker down to focus solely on protecting Sarah and waiting for more troops from Denver. Eli traced a road on the map spread before them. Instead, I propose a two-pronged approach. Captain Reynolds escorts Sarah to Denver along the eastern road with maximum security. And the second prong, Reynolds inquired, I take a smaller force to Bear Creek. We eliminate the threat at its source. The audacity of the plan created momentary silence. Martha was the first to recover. That's extraordinarily dangerous, Captain Morgan. Less dangerous than waiting for Reed to attack again, Eli countered. We know where they're camped. They don't expect us to come to them. The advantage is ours. Reynolds considered the proposal. It could work. My main force accompanies Miss Carpenter, creating a visible target that Reed's scouts would surely detect. Meanwhile, you lead a flanking action against their camp. I'll need men familiar with the terrain, Eli specified, and willing to operate decisively. The implication was clear. This would not be a standard militia operation with formal arrests and procedures. It would be more akin to the counter-insurgency tactics Eli had learned during the war, quick, ruthless, effective. I know, just the men, Reynolds nodded. Former cavalry like yourself. They understand this kind of mission. As the details were refined, Sarah watched Eli with a complex expression, concern mingled with something deeper. When the others departed to begin preparations, she approached him privately. This plan puts you at tremendous risk, she said quietly. No more than you have already faced, he replied, and it gives us our best chance of ending this quickly, decisively. She studied his face, searching for something in his expression. Is this about the Petersons, about revenge? Justice, Eli corrected, though he recognized the fine line between the concepts. Reed and his men have declared war on anyone who stands for law and order. They need to understand that has consequences. Sarah's hand found his, her touch conveying concern words couldn't fully express. Just promise me something. What? Promise you will come back. Her voice held an intensity that transcended their tactical discussion. When this is finished, when Wade faces justice, promise you will come back. The request contained layers of meaning beyond its simple words, an acknowledgement of what had grown between them and a future that might exist beyond the current conflict. I promise, Eli said, meaning it more sincerely than any vow he'd sworn before. The next 24 hours passed in careful preparation. Captain Reynolds organized an impressive escort for Sarah's journey to Denver, 20 militiamen, an armored wagon for the journal and key witnesses, a carefully planned route with multiple contingencies. Meanwhile, Eli selected 8 men from among Reynolds' troops, all veterans, all experienced riders, familiar with the territory west of Silver Creek. Their mission was planned with military precision approach under cover of darkness, neutralize sentries, capture Reed and his lieutenants if possible, eliminate them if necessary. Grey Wolf, who had arrived in Silver Creek with reports from Night Sky, volunteered to guide Eli's party through the backcountry to approach the Bear Creek camp undetected. The tribal warriors' tracking skills would prove invaluable against men like Reed, who knew how to cover their movements. On the morning of departure, a solemn gathering assembled behind the telegraph office. Sarah, dressed for travel in a practical riding habit, stood with Martha and Dr. Hayes beside the waiting escort. Across the yard, Eli's smaller force prepared their horses, checking weapons and supplies, with the quiet efficiency of experienced soldiers. Governor Root will have additional troops waiting at Elk Ridge Station, Reynolds informed Sarah. From there, it's a direct route to Denver with maximum security. Sarah nodded, though her attention remained focused on Eli, who was making final arrangements with Grey Wolf. When he finally approached her, the others discreetly withdrew to allow them a moment of privacy. "This isn't goodbye," Eli said before she could speak. "Just separate paths to the same destination." "Denver?" she asked with a small smile. "Justice," he clarified, then amended. "Though Denver too eventually." Sarah's composure, maintained so admirably throughout their ordeal, momentarily faltered. "Be careful, Eli. Reed is dangerous, desperate. So am I when necessary." He touched her cheek briefly, the gesture conveying what words could not. "Keep the journal safe. Get to the governor. Finish what your father started." "And you finish what you've started," she replied meaningfully. "All of it." The moment stretched between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Then duty reasserted itself as Reynolds approached to announce their departure time. The two parties left Silver Creek by different roads, Sarah's escort heading east with considerable visibility, Eli's smaller force disappearing quietly into the western foothills. The town watched them go with a mixture of hope and apprehension, understanding that the outcome of these parallel missions would determine not just Wade's fate, but the future of their community. Guided by Grey Wolf, Eli's party traveled through terrain too rough for conventional passage. Narrow game trails, dry creek beds, boulder-strewn slopes that concealed their approach from potential observers. By nightfall, they had covered nearly 20 miles, positioning themselves within striking distance of Reed's reported location. As they made cold camp beneath a rocky overhang, Eli studied the men who had volunteered for this dangerous mission. Veterans, all they displayed the quiet competence of soldiers who had seen combat and understood its realities. Some had fought alongside him during the war. Others had faced hostile tribes in the territories that followed. All recognized the necessity of their current task. "Reed has sentries posted on the ridgelines," Grey Wolf reported after scouting ahead. "Two men rotating every 4 hours. The main camp lies in a natural bowl beside the creek, perhaps 15 men remaining, plus Reed." "Armed?" Eli inquired. "Rifles, pistols, 2 men with shotguns." The tribal warriors sketched the camp's layout in the dirt. 3 fires. Reed's tent here separate from the others. Eli absorbed this information, formulating the approach. "We move at midnight. Neutralize the sentries silently if possible. Then surround the camp before moving in." "They will fight," Grey Wolf predicted. "These men follow Wade's way. No surrender." "Then they'll face the consequences of that choice," Eli replied grimly. As midnight approached, dark clouds obscured the moon, a tactical advantage for their infiltration. The men checked their weapons one final time, then moved out in pairs, approaching the camp from multiple directions as planned. Eli and Grey Wolf took the most challenging route, scaling a near vertical rock face to approach the sentry position from behind. The guards, silhouetted against the night sky, never heard them coming. Grey Wolf's hand clamped over the man's mouth while Eli's knife found its mark, a swift, merciful end compared to what Reed's men had inflicted on the Swedish settlers and the Petersons. Across the ridge, the second sentry met a similar fate at the hands of 2 other veterans. With the perimeter secured, Eli's force converged on the sleeping camp, taking positions among the surrounding rocks and vegetation. Eli raised his hand, then dropped it sharply, the signal to commence. A volley of rifle fire tore through Reed's camp, striking carefully selected targets. The 2 shotgun-wielding guards first, then men positioned near weapons caches. Chaos erupted as Reed's followers scrambled for cover and weapons. Some returned fire blindly into the darkness, while others fell before they could react. From his elevated position, Eli identified Reed emerging from his tent, revolver in hand, shouting orders to form a defensive line. "Reed," Eli called, his voice carrying across the camp. "Surrender now, you're surrounded." Reed's response was predictable, a volley of bullets in the direction of Eli's voice. Around the camp, Eli's men continued their disciplined fire, gradually tightening the noose around the surviving defenders. As the firefight intensified, Eli signaled for the final phase, a coordinated rush from multiple directions, overwhelming the remaining resistance. He led one group directly toward Reed's position, determined to capture the lieutenant alive if possible. The close-quarters combat was brutal and brief. Reed's men, though fanatic in their loyalty, were outmatched by the disciplined veterans of Eli's force. Within minutes, only Reed himself remained barricaded behind overturned wagons near the creek bank. "It's over, Reed," Eli called, advancing cautiously. "Your men are dead or captured. There's nowhere to run." "It's never over," Reed shouted back, his voice edged with desperation. The colonel will be free. His vision can't be stopped by the likes of you, Morgan. Wade's vision died the moment he chose murder over progress. Eli replied, signaling his men to circle behind Reed's position. Surrender now, and you'll receive a fair trial. Reed's bitter laugh carried across the campsite. Fair. There's nothing fair in this territory anymore. Not since you and that carpenter woman interfered. Last chance, Reed. Throw out your weapons. The standoff stretched for several tense moments. Then, with startling suddenness, Reed broke cover, not to surrender, but to charge directly at Eli, firing his revolver with reckless abandon. Eli's rifle cracked once. Reed staggered, then collapsed face down in the creek bed, the waters running red around him. As dawn broke over the devastated camp, Eli surveyed the aftermath with the detached professionalism of a veteran commander. 15 of Reed's men lay dead, 3 wounded, but surviving, 2 captured unharmed. Of Eli's force, 1 man had been killed, 3 others wounded but expected to recover. Reed chose his path, Grey Wolf observed, standing beside Eli as the bodies were collected. As did Wade. Eli agreed, though I suspect Reed never questioned where that path led. They buried their fallen comrade on a hill overlooking the creek, marking his grave with a simple wooden cross. The wounded were treated as best possible in field conditions, prepared for transport back to Silver Creek. Reed's surviving followers were bound for the journey to town, where they would face justice for their roles in the violence. As they prepared to depart, one of the captured men, younger than the others, with fear replacing his earlier defiance, approached Eli under guard. Wade said you were his best officer, the young man said, studying Eli with confused respect. Said you understood loyalty better than most. I understood loyalty, Eli corrected, but also its limits. Wade forgot that loyalty to a man must never supersede loyalty to principles. The prisoner absorbed this distinction. What happens now, to us, I mean? You'll stand trial for your actions, Eli replied honestly. But you're young. There may be leniency for those who cooperate, who help dismantle what remains of Wade's organization. Hope flickered in the young man's eyes, the possibility of redemption of a different path than the one Reed had followed to its violent conclusion. By midday, they were halfway back to Silver Creek when a rider approached from the east, a militia courier dispatched to locate them. The man's expression conveyed urgency even before he delivered his message. Captain Morgan, Miss Carpenter's escort, was ambushed at Elk Ridge Station. They repelled the attack, but there were casualties. Captain Reynolds was seriously wounded. Eli's heart seized. Sarah, is she alive? The courier confirmed quickly. Yes, sir, but Captain Reynolds was seriously wounded. The escort diverted to Fort Collins for medical assistance and reinforcements. Wade's men, some were captured. Their leader escaped, a man named Davis. Lieutenant Davis, another of Wade's loyal officers. The coordinated attack suggested Wade's organization remained more intact than they had believed, with resources beyond Reed's small band of followers. We need to reach Fort Collins immediately, Eli decided. Grey Wolf, can you guide the wounded and prisoners back to Silver Creek? The tribal warrior nodded. I will ensure their safe return. Selecting 3 of his most able men, Eli prepared for a forced march to Fort Collins, nearly 60 miles distant, but reachable within a day with fresh horses and determined riders. Davis won't stop, Eli warned his companions as they departed. If he's following Wade's orders, he'll make another attempt before they reach Denver. The journey to Fort Collins became a race against exhaustion, the men pushing themselves and their mounts to the limits of endurance. They reached the fort shortly after midnight, finding it in a state of high alert following the ambush. In the fort's infirmary, Eli found Captain Reynolds unconscious, but stable, a bullet wound to his shoulder, being tended by military surgeons. Sarah sat beside his bed, unharmed but visibly shaken by the day's events. She rose at Eli's entrance, relief washing across her features. Without hesitation, she crossed the room and embraced him, propriety temporarily forgotten in the emotional moment. You're alive, she breathed against his shoulder. When we heard gunfire to the west, I feared. Reed's camp, Eli explained, holding her carefully. It's finished. His men won't threaten anyone again. Sarah stepped back, composing herself. Davis and his men hit us at the station. They knew our route, our strength. Someone must have informed them. Wade still has allies throughout the territory, Eli acknowledged. What's the plan now? Governor Root has dispatched a full cavalry company from Denver, she explained. They'll escort us the remainder of the journey. We leave at dawn. Through the night, Eli coordinated with the fort's commander to ensure maximum security for the final leg of Sarah's journey. The journal remained safely locked in the fort's armory, guarded by trusted men. Captain Reynolds would remain behind to recover his mission, now in Eli's hands. As preparations continued, Sarah and Eli found a moment of privacy on the fort's western rampart. The night was clear, stars speckling the vast Colorado sky above the distant mountains, mere shadows against the horizon. Reed Hawkins, Davis Wade's lieutenants, have shown remarkable loyalty, Sarah observed. What inspires such devotion in men? Eli considered the question, remembering his own unwavering loyalty to Wade during the war and after. Vision, he answered finally. Wade offered them a share in something larger than themselves, a place in the empire he planned to build. At any cost. The costs always seem abstract when you're focused on the goal. Eli's gaze turned inward, reflecting on his own journey. It's easy to justify necessary evils when you believe in the ultimate good of your cause. What changed for you? Sarah asked softly. Why did you walk away when others remained? Eli was silent for a long moment. I saw the faces of those affected by our necessary evils, not as obstacles to progress, but as people. People like Wildflower and her family, like the Swedish settlers. His eyes found hers in the darkness. Like you. The simple honesty of his answer touched Sarah deeply. She moved closer, her hand finding his on the rough wooden railing. My father would have liked the man you've become, Eli Morgan. I hope to continue becoming someone worthy of that assessment, he replied, his voice roughened with emotion. The moment between them deepened the fortress, and its bustle fading into insignificance compared to the connection they shared. When Sarah's lips found his, the kiss conveyed not just affection, but promise of healing, of purpose beyond vengeance, of a future neither had dared imagine weeks earlier. 3 weeks later, Sherman Wade's trial began in Denver's territorial courthouse. The evidence presented was overwhelming. Senator Carpenter's journal testimony from dozens of witnesses, including Sarah Dr. Hayes, and survivors from communities Wade had terrorized, financial records documenting bribes and fraudulent land acquisitions. Wade himself maintained the dignified bearing that had served him so well during the war, neither denying his actions nor expressing remorse for them. His defense rested primarily on justification that his methods, while perhaps extreme, served the greater good of territorial development and national progress. On the trial's 5th day, Eli Morgan took the stand face-to-face with his former commander for the first time since their confrontation in Silver Creek. He recounted their shared history during the war, the values Wade had once embodied, and the gradual corruption of those values in pursuit of wealth and power. The man I followed into battle at Gettysburg believed in preserving the Union, Eli testified, his voice carrying through the packed courtroom. The man who ordered Senator Carpenter's assassination believed only in his own empire. Somewhere between those two men lies the tragedy of Sherman Wade. Wade's eyes never left Eli's face during this testimony, his expression unreadable, except for a fleeting moment when something like regret flickered across his features. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning their verdict, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Wade to hang a punishment, later commuted to life imprisonment, through the intervention of former military colleagues who remembered his wartime service. As Wade was led from the courtroom for transport to the territorial prison, he paused beside Eli, who stood with Sarah near the gallery railing. You won, Morgan, Wade said quietly, though I wonder if you understand the cost of victory. I understand it better than you ever did, Colonel. That was always the difference between us. Wade's gaze shifted to Sarah. Miss Carpenter, your father was an honorable opponent. He would have been proud of your persistence. My father was not your opponent, Mr. Wade, Sarah corrected him firmly. He was a servant of justice, as am I. Something like respect flickered in Wade's eyes before the guards led him away. His empire crumbled, his ambitions thwarted, yet his dignity somehow intact. Outside the courthouse, Denver continued its bustling growth, the same progress Wade had championed, but now proceeding under the watchful eyes of those committed to ensuring it didn't come at the expense of justice and human dignity. 1 month after the trial's conclusion, Eli Morgan stood on the porch of a modest home on Denver's western edge. The property offered views of both the growing city and the mountains beyond, civilization and wilderness in balanced perspective. Sarah joined him, her arm linking with his as they surveyed the land that would become their home. Her position as the governor's special advisor on territorial development had already resulted in reformed land policies and renewed negotiations with the tribal nations. Eli's work as territorial marshal had brought him respect and purpose beyond anything his solitary ranch life had offered. "Do you miss it?" Sarah asked, somehow knowing his thoughts had turned to the isolated cabin in Silver Creek Valley. "The solitude sometimes," Eli admitted, "but not as much as I'd have missed this." His gesture encompassed not just the property, but the life they were building together. A shared mission, a partnership founded in trial and forged through adversity. "We should visit the ranch someday," Sarah suggested, "perhaps in spring when the valley blooms." "I'd like that." Eli's arm tightened around her shoulders, "though I've found that home isn't about the place anymore." Sarah's smile acknowledged the deeper truth in his words, that their separate journeys had converged into a shared path. Neither could have anticipated that rainy night when he found her gasping for breath beneath a heavy tarp. As sunset painted the distant mountains in gold and crimson, Eli reflected on the debts that had defined his life, to Wade for saving him at Gettysburg, to Senator Carpenter for giving him a second chance, to Sarah for showing him a purpose beyond isolation and regret. Some debts could never be fully repaid. Others transformed into something greater, into bonds that connected rather than constrained, into foundations upon which to build rather than burdens to carry. "What are you thinking?" Sarah asked, noting his contemplative expression. Eli gazed toward the horizon, where the last light illuminated both what was and what could be. "That everyone deserves a final breath," he said softly, "a last chance to become who they were meant to be." Sarah's hand found his, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of those who had faced death together and chosen life instead. "Then breathe deeply, Eli Morgan," she murmured. "Our journey is just beginning." Beyond them, Colorado stretched vast and promising, its mountains and valleys, its towns and wilderness, its past and future, all echoing with the whispers of those who had sacrificed for justice, with the quiet determination of those who continued their work, and with the hope of all who believed that even in a land where power often prevailed, conscience could still find its voice. And in that vast landscape, two people who had found each other through the storm watched the setting sun, knowing that whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they would face them together, their separate debts resolved, their shared purpose clear, their intertwined futures stretching before them like the endless western horizon.